Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Hope it's been contemplative and enjoyable for you thus far. And welcome to this evening's school committee meeting. First off, we have administrative business consent agenda. Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Stephen. Is there a second? Thank you, Valerie. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. That brings us to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you tonight. We are going to jump right into our our superintendent's update for the school committee. Walking through a few community highlights, share some important information regarding our health updates, information about our superintendent school visits, and then the most important part of my update is always sharing our spotlight of excellence. This past weekend, the BHS speech and debate team competed for bids at the NSDA National Speech and Debate Tournament in Phoenix. We congratulate Samara Bauer, class of 24, as well for scoring PSB's first ever national qualifier in the speech competition. Her original oratory title, The Ostrich and the Lion, Information Avoidance, was one of the three chosen to represent the New England district. We also congratulate Brett Schneider, class of 25, for his selection as the first alternate for New England, the New England district in the Lincoln Douglas debate competition. Congratulations to both of those students. We, just an update on the Lawrence school principal search. We've begun that process. We hosted 2 meetings this week, one with the Lawrence School faculty and staff, and one with the Lawrence School parents and guardians to discuss the process and begin to compile feedback for the leadership profile. During the weeks of February 27th and March 6th, the interview committee will review all applications as well as conduct first round interviews. The second round of interviews will follow, as well as opportunities for the entire school community to meet the finalists. We continue to monitor the number of positive COVID-19 cases reported within our school community. And as you can see, particularly here from January 27th through February 2nd, there were 32 cases reported. And for the period of February 3rd through February 9th, we had 28 cases reported. We continue to host, again, the COVID-19 as well as flu vaccination clinics for the community. And we held the most recent clinic at Ruffin Ridley Monday. Our next clinic, we believe, is going to be scheduled for early March. As far as my visits out to the schools, I'm certainly enjoying my time in classrooms as well as visiting with our school leaders. I've recently visited Lawrence, Baker, and Pierce, and on the horizon is Ruffin Ridley, Baker, Heath, Lawrence, and Driscoll. Friday, February 3rd, I was invited to the Heath PTO to their monthly meeting. We had a great turnout and enjoyed my time with the Heath parents. I also visited most of our school buildings last Friday to check in on them with the cold weather, frigid weather that we had here in the New England region. Wednesday evening, I had the opportunity to join the English Learner Pack at their meeting and spend time with our parents there. And the asterisks, again, here in the visit schedule, denotes my school days where I'm in the school for the entire day, and that second round will begin on March 1st. And now for the real reason you're listening to me this evening, is our Spotlight on Excellence. This evening, we're pleased to shine the spotlight on excellence to a long-standing and valuable program, the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Program, also known as CFCE. CFCE programs, funded by a grant through the Department of Early Education and Care, are locally based programs that provide child care development services to our preschool-aged children. From home visits to community play groups, professional development for early educators, Brookline's CFCE program is an incredible resource for Brookline families, staffed by a dedicated and enthusiastic team of educators. I'll turn the microphone over to BEEP Principal Margaret Eberhardt so that she can introduce us to our CFCE colleagues and tell us more about this wonderful program. And Mrs. Eberhardt.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory, and thank you, School Committee, for inviting us here this evening to shine a spotlight on the Coordinated Family Community Engagement Grant. I am very excited to introduce the team and for them to speak to you about the incredible work they do. Of all the things that the Public Schools of Brookline does, this community work is very near and dear to our hearts and incredibly impactful and powerful in the transformative process for families and children. So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. And oh, if I can, hold on, sorry about that. It always like gets me every time I go to try to share. I have to go somewhere else. Hold on one second. I'm going to introduce Erin Herney. She's the CFC program coordinator, and she is going to talk about her work along with Jenny Chu, the CFC community outreach coordinator, and Matina Lang, our incredible Parent-Child Plus coordinator. So without any further ado, Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. As Margaret said, I'm super excited to talk about our work for CFCE for the grant that we run here in Brookline. My role before coming, I'm a BEAT program coordinator, and this is my first year also as a CFCE coordinator. Prior to that, I was in Tina's role as the Parent-Child Plus coordinator. So I've loved this work for 6 years, and I'm excited to talk about it. The one hang up I have that I will start with is that there are so many acronyms that it's really hard to follow along. So we're going to use CFCE to describe the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Grant, because that's a mouthful, and EEC to talk about the Department of Early Education Care. So it's a lot to try to figure out who does what and for what, but I think the bottom line is that we're doing really good work in Brookline and for Brookline families. And the whole aim of the grant is really to, I want to make sure I say this properly, is to support all families in the community, but mostly to identify and serve high needs families that are not engaged in the formal early education and care system. So that's one of our priorities, which you'll see tonight when we highlight our Parent-Child Plus team, as well as our community playgroups and our community facilitator, Jenny Chu. So this is a list of our team right here. So Margaret already introduced me as the engagement coordinator. Jenny is on tonight, and she'll talk in a minute about the playgroups. Tina is on to talk about, she's our parent-child coordinator. And then these are our early learning specialists, which is another way of saying our home visitors who really engage directly with families around developmental parenting. So our grant, it's a big grant in Massachusetts and across the country, but for Brookline, we have approximately $140,000 that we work with. And so as I said, the aim of that grant is really geared at families who would not have the opportunity to engage in developmentally appropriate educational opportunities. And so that's what we're here for. So that in Brookline, this looks like Parent-Child Plus. This looks like community playgroups, STEM Saturdays. I'm very excited that we're starting that again in March. Just to tell you how much families clamor for this sort of education, we set up a Google form and asked the local EEC centers, do you have any interest in coming to STEM Saturdays? And 167 families answered within 5 days that they would like to come. So I think that we need to roll out some more opportunities around that. Really excited, we were awarded another grant through the Boston Children's Museum geared towards social emotional learning, which there'll be a slide about that in a minute. We offer parent workshops and trainings also for local EEC centers. We're trying to partner and strengthen our relationships there. And we also offer professional development opportunities for early educators. Tina, I will let you talk about Parent-Child Plus. I think are you muted?
Indeed, I am.
There you go.
Um, Okay, so do you, should I follow the screen or should I?
Just say what you want.
Okay. I'm Tina Lang, Parent Child Plus Coordinator. PC Plus is a home visiting early literacy program. We support parents in their role as their child's first and most important teacher. I work with a great team of early learning specialists who, by June 1st, will have completed 828 visits to 18 families using 414 quality books and toys that the families will get to keep. The families we serve this year are Haitian, Afghan, Pakistani, Ethiopian, Congolese, Palestinian, Chinese, and African American. Most are English language learners and fairly new to the country. We work hard to connect the families with needed resources such as access to school, early intervention, scholarships to art class at BAC, playgroup, the food pantry, on and on and on. We look forward to continuing our work supporting our neighbors in Brookline.
These are some great pictures of the team on here on the top, and then some of the books they have and the activities they do with the children. I love the note on the bottom from Marvin.
Yes.
There's Tina giving out the certificates. Everyone gets one at the end of the program. And here's just some wonderful parents and children learning together.
Jenny, do you want to talk about community playgroup?
Sure thing. Good
Great.
evening, everyone. I'm Jenny Chu. I'm thrilled to be now in my 4th year as Brookline's Community Outreach Coordinator. And the absolute highlight of my week is running our twice weekly community playgroups, both on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays over at a wonderful community partner, Trust Early Learners. And on Tuesdays in our Brookline housing at 22 High Street in their community room. We provide quality programming for our town's wonderful young children and their families. We focus on early literacy, play and social skills, and we also, as I said, partner with these terrific organizations in our community. And I'm just so grateful to be involved in this grant that allows me to provide an amazing service to the community that I live in and love. Thank you.
Jenny is being modest. Last year, she had no home to run the playgroups, and she reinvented playgroups outside. And see how many people were there? She had that same crowd every single week up until it was too cold. And then when it came warm again, back outside. So she was the program that could last year. It was quite amazing, quite amazing work last year.
Thank you.
Do you want to say a quick thing about STEM Saturdays? STEM Saturdays are the wonderful program we run on Saturdays. It's about science, technology, engineering, and math. We use the We Engineer program from the Science Museum, and we use our Kibo coding robot from Tufts Developmental Learning Center. And they are very engaging, highly interactive parent-child programs that really foster that developmental parenting that is at the heart and soul of the CFCE grant. You want me to talk about this too? So last year we were very lucky to, or 2 years ago, I guess it was, we received 2 grants from the Children's Museum to run virtual playgroups. And this one, the Me, You, We one, was extremely popular. It really worked on supporting the development of social emotional learning skills in the home. And every single parent and family that signed up received this kit that you see on the left here that had puppets, books, materials, and each week there was a curriculum that you use to interact with these materials. And we are very grateful to be doing it again. And we last time we ran one in English and one in Chinese, and that was a really amazing opportunity as well.
I think this is the slide that really sums up the work as well. So part of the grant is our community partnerships and our real emphasis on cultivating and maintaining relationships within the town and with other stakeholders. And we've had 3 community partnership meetings this year. Our 4th one is scheduled for April, in which all of the places listed on this slide get together and we talk about what resources we have to offer families, how we can work together for programming. Last week, Family Aid came and spoke. That's a shelter that's opened up on Harvard Ave. There's 35 families in Family Aid, and we really sort of put our heads together to think about how can we best support the families living there who are in Brookline. And the library, Macy from the library came and she talked about services that they have and how she could send somebody over to do English classes. And, it's just this beautiful work that happens in these meetings. And so these are just a few of the ways that the grant pulls together for all families in Brookline.
Erin, will you just mention quickly the ages of most of the age of the children that we work with in the program?
Sure. So I would say, wow, anywhere from birth, right? We have some programs. We just started with pregnant moms. We found a resource for moms who are in their third trimester and who are going to need high quality baby things that they would not have without room to grow. But typically I would say it's between 12 months to 4 years old. Obviously, we would really like to get everyone into BEEP. We work really hard on that part, but it's really meeting the needs of young families in Brookline, or families with young children, I should say. So 4 and under, 5 and under is really the emphasis of the work.
I found this quote on the Center for Family Engagement and Transformative Engagement, and the piece of it that this is inclusive, individualized, integrated, and impactful is really the work of the CFCE. Each of those I's there in this description are what they do. It's very individualized with home visits. It's very integrated. It's very inclusive with all types of learners and from people from all over the world. And it's truly impactful. You can go on the National Parent Child Plus website to look at the research they do on the long-term impact for families that participate in these home visiting programs. And so I just want to thank Erin, and I want to thank Jenny and Bettina and all of the home visitors, and Asaka and Zong, who are the other playgroup coordinators, for the work that they do. And this work is unbelievable. And Helen Terlevsky has been a part of this grant when it was a different name, and she's a great supporter of the work that we do. So we thank you for giving us this opportunity to highlight the importance of community and family engagement in the work of early childhood education. And that's all. If you have
Any
any
questions? Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is fabulous. I know Helen has talked about this on occasion, but this is just fabulous work. And I love it. I'm wondering a couple of things. Is there a wait list for programs, or are we able to accommodate everyone who wants to take part in this?
Currently, there's a wait list for Parent Child Plus. So a few of our families have moved, so we're putting some new families in this week and next. So the wait list will decrease, but yes, there's typically a wait list.
Yeah, and I'm wondering. I know it's things are fluid, and our classrooms are available and not available, and available and not available. But I have to say, when I was in the Boston schools, I had play groups that came to my school. And it was just wonderful to get families into the school and for the kids to be there even as 2-year-olds. And I know you do that a little bit with BEEP, but I know you were struggling to find rooms. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't think about that someday in the future when we might have an extra room or something that we could offer. It just gives a grounding to our families to know they're really part of the school community. So I don't know if that's possible, if we've done that, if you've thought about it, but.
We've thought about it. And I think last year with COVID, the restrictions that were, still ongoing, and some of these children are very little. They're like 18 months, they wear masks, right, Jenny? Jenny can speak to that. So that was a real challenge last year in terms of the space and finding some, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Pre-COVID, we were very happily housed at the 2 community rooms over at Egmont and High Street. And then COVID struck and we went virtual for quite some time. And then we really were scrambling to find space. Lots of restrictions in terms of how many children we were able to accommodate, and vaccination requirements for whichever school or organization we were and that remains today now that we're in the winter and we are at those 2 locations. We do registration for Trust Early Learners. We do not for the 22 High Street, but there are restrictions still that remain from COVID, which was why we were actually very excited to be out in the community. The community, we had up to 50 plus children at a local park every week,
Oh,
Mondays and Tuesdays, and it was really quite wonderful. So there was no restrictions. Everyone got to take their masks off. So it was really quite lovely. I'm actually looking forward to that in the spring.
And Suzanne, some of it has to do with location.
Yep.
Like, yeah, so like we would, like at Putterham, we would happily have a play group out at that location, but it's really a matter of like, how can people get there? And the things that are like centrally located are just the easiest. So that's why High Street was so lovely. And that's why,
yeah, no, that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
that
one of our
makes
biggest challenges.
Yeah, but it is nice to have them in schools if we have the room at some point, or if it makes sense for the
Absolutely.
population, the demographic, where they are living. And then my last question is, so you don't do this all for $140,000. I mean, we have other money, correct? I mean, so, right, you're offering a tremendous number of services and programs. And so be sure that we continue to support them so that we have this wonderful program. Thank you very much.
Mariah?
Thanks. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed the presentation, and definitely on social media, I've seen people talking about, especially those outdoor activity groups and how excited they were to go to those, and just how wonderful that was. And a week or 2 ago, I mentioned, Jenny, to Mike Chan in the central office that I see you posting about some of these events, but they weren't on the PSB main social media, and how great it would be to have them go there where they'd get even more eyes on them, and then they could be shared to other places. And I think he said he was going to follow up with you, but it would be really great. I don't know if he has or yet or not, but I'm glad we're talking about this here tonight, because I think it's a great opportunity to promote the work you're doing and to make the community aware that this is really integral to, it's part of your pipeline. It's the part of the PSB pipeline that is getting an inclusive way of all community members having access to services and to support. So I think it's wonderful. I think it would be really great for us to be able to push out the CFCE events through the central communications channels too. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mariah.
Helen?
Thank you. First of all, thank you guys for coming and explaining much better than I do when I give the liaison report what you do and how much work you do. And it is only for $148,000. That's all they have in terms of funding. And I think we should have more. That's one of the things. The grant is up for renewal. And hopefully we will be able to make a case for Brookline getting more funding. You know, it's a problem because as I've said before, the state thinks that we're a wealthy community, but there are many families within Brookline who are not. And this program does an amazing job of helping them. Martina, I had one question. Is it for lack of volunteers or lack of money that we don't service all the kids who would like to be in the Parent-Child Plus?
Lack of money, because we don't have volunteers. They're paid providers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it would be lack of money, because if we had more visitors, we could have more time slots available. You know, it's
Right.
Most families like to be visited in the morning because the children are more, you know, their best selves at that time, typically.
Mm-hmm.
So those are popular slots. So I would love to have many more people doing it if possible. That's my dream.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to get more money into the grant to be able to accommodate those children.
Last year, Tina had over 24 families in the PC Plus program, and like working herself to the core, trying to, and even the EEC person who works there was like, oh my goodness, like, you know, so we told her, then give us more money and we will be happy to have more families. That's for sure. Yeah.
Great.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about STEM Saturdays.
Sure, absolutely. Erin, do you want to talk about it, or are you?
I'm just going to mute myself because I'm at Putterham and the cleaning crew's coming in. This is bad timing. So I'm just going to mute while the vacuum goes by. So Margaret, do you mind taking this?
No, not at all. So,
Thank you.
STEM Saturdays has been with the program for a long while. It grew out of different towns have different initiatives. We call it STEM Saturday, and it's taught by an educator, a pre-K teacher in BEEP, and also now and an assistance teacher. And they make a curriculum, and like I said, it's the We Engineer and the Kibo robot. And we also usually have an outdoor component where you might go on a nature hunt or a scavenger hunt outside. And it's really to expose children to different concepts around science, around technology, around engineering, about building things, about problem solving. The We Engineer program is fantastic. If you look it up, you can look it up on their Science Museum website. There's a puppet that goes along with it, and the puppet has a problem, and the children have to strategize and work together with their parents to solve the problem. And it's just a really wonderful engagement opportunity. Parents come with just themselves and one of their children. Sometimes they come with multiple children, and it really is an opportunity for parents to settle in a quiet space with other families and work on that parenting piece with their children in a very sort of educational, fun way at the same time. The coding robot is fantastic, and the parents really love that, learning how to code using Kibo. So,
and our last community connections meeting, the Brookline Arts Center asked if we could put the A in for STEAM and make sure the arts were represented. So that will be next on the agenda as well. So we're also going to fold art into our STEM Saturdays to make it STEAM. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds great. Anybody else? All right, back to you, Dr. Guillory.
So at this time, we would like to present the Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence awarded to the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Program. With gratitude for your dedication to Brookline's youngest learners, and in recognition of the positive impact that your work has had in the lives of Brookline families. And with that, we share, you get it, my screen is blurred here. The Spotlight on Excellence. So thank you all again for your hard work and dedication.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory, and thank you to the Public Schools of Brookline for being the lead agency and working with us to support the grants work. It's really one of the best things that we do. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for coming and presenting and sharing with the community the outstanding work that you have been engaged in and the offerings that are available. You're welcome to stay, of course, if you would like, but if you want to go on with your evening, we certainly understand.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Now,
you, everybody.
did anyone have questions regarding any other elements from the superintendent's report? All right, seeing none, that brings us to public comment. Oh, sorry, go ahead,
David,
Mariah.
I'm sorry, I just had one question. I presume there was no water damage, no pipes burst or anything like that, Linus, you mentioned quickly you went on Friday. I was just curious.
Sure, great question. We were surprisingly spared. And so thank you, Mariah, for asking that question. A huge shout out to our building department teams, our town partners in that. They were visiting all of the town's buildings as well as our schools, checking in, making sure that we were all set and ready to go. And so I think we were extremely fortunate. I heard some districts actually could not reopen Monday, some buildings, I'm sorry, in some districts could not reopen Monday because of burst pipes and those types of things. So we were, our outstanding both school and town team made sure that we were ready to go. So thank you for surfacing that, Mariah.
Great news. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to public comment, and no one has signed up for public comment. So we will move on to our next agenda item, presentations and discussions of current issues. And first up will be a discussion and possible vote on the FY24 budget. Dr. Guillory.
All right. So tonight we want to walk through for the entire committee the preliminary budget. We've certainly look through aspects of this. We shared some additional information last night at Finance Subcommittee and refined some numbers, and I hope I have not made any numerical calculations. So if there are, you have to put them on my head and we'll make sure we get those corrected. But we want to talk through our budget process timeline. Last year, we introduced the concept of this timeline. And just to reorient folks, above this line, we have sort of PSB actions, and below the line are non-PSB actions. So kicking off in December, the town of Brookline submitted the preliminary budget recommendation based on FY24 projections, and our budget allocation at that time from the town was $127,323,182. In January, the school department then submitted the preliminary budget based on the district needs and requests, and that budget number was $131,864,365. So right there, we recognized a gap of $4.5 million. Fast forward or advance a little bit more, we held our mandatory budget hearing that's required by statute, and tonight is the preliminary vote on the budgeting process. But this week, we also received an updated appropriation based on revised town numbers, and our budget actually decreased, or the monies coming from the town projection decreased slightly to $127,005,124. So and in mid-February, I was actually meeting with the administrator today, and a town administrator, and he shared that the GIC numbers are coming in as projected right now. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit more or have those solidify a little bit more. And I was also informed today that I believe the free cash was certified. So that and that came back a little bit better. So hopefully our capital projects that are connected to that will be in a better stead. But February through May, we'll be refining the budget book based on discussions at Finance Subcommittee, full school committee, advisory, select board, and other public forums. In March, we are anticipating the governor's budget. And you can see again, the rest of the timeline, school committee, early May, potentially late April, the school committee will vote a final budget, and then June, further refinement if needed, and publication of our new final budget book. We want to make sure we do that this year so that we know exactly where we're starting. Next year, we know what our comparisons. March through May, the government approves final state budget and allocation to Brookline. And then early to mid-May, a town override vote, town meeting votes for final appropriation, and then July FY24 begins. And during this entire period, we have active budget reconciliation and adjustments. You've seen this slide before, and I think the key takeaways here, again, we've updated to reflect the decrease in the town appropriation at this point in time, and we've updated to show that our budget gap has increased to 4.8 million from the allocation and the submitted budget. But the overall or the overall change in our FY24 budget is a difference of approximately $2 million when you look at the overall. But when you look at sort of the trade-offs between the grants that we were using, we see, as well as increased ask, we see that our overall net ask or growth in the total budget is small compared to where our gaps are projected here, but those differences were certainly recognized by the use of one-time funds. Helen, I see your hand. You're on mute.
Thank you very much for recognizing me. A quick question. Did the town say why the revenues went down?
We didn't, No. Mariah, am I saying that correctly? Because that was an email exchange.
There was. I didn't completely understand the entire rationale, but I believe, and this needs to be confirmed still, that as we voted last year to support an increase in the building department of $800,000 that was funded from ARP. And the
Yes,
and the 127.3 did
yes.
not account for any increased funding to the building department. And so when they put back, and I'm not sure if it's some or all of that $800,000 into the building department budget, I believe that the $300,000 reduction is related to folding the building to basically they're folding the building department increase back into the budget. And so that
Well,
reduction
taking
is
it out of our budget.
right. But what I still don't understand is it was $800,000. Now it's 300,000 from us. Does that mean that the building department is fully funded right now? Is there still a $500,000 gap from last year? There's still some questions to be answered, but I believe my understanding is, and I'm pretty sure on this bit, that it's related to those funds. I just didn't understand how it all worked in terms of what status it left the building department in and so on.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And so, and I think to that point, both your question, Helen, and Mariah's, because we were on an email thread having this exchange back and forth, I think it's worth us understanding this sooner rather than later, because we discovered it this way. So it wasn't something that we were informed prior to. We just happened to ask some questions and found out this way. And again, I understand everyone is busy, but we're all making decisions, and important decisions, and we need to make sure that our numbers do remain aligned there.
Absolutely.
So thank you for raising that. So our key takeaways here is that the overall, again, budget grows at just 1.2% compared to FY23. The loss of pandemic funds, which have sustained PSB for several years, contributes to the shift from grants to the budget request, and results in the overall now $4.8 million deficit between the request and the allocation. And again, we're offsetting $1 million or so that was shifted 1 year to the BEEP revolver. So again, this is a graphic representation, again, of where budget sits. So the vast majority, 87%, sits in personnel, supplies, materials, contracted services, other expenses, fringe, and equipment make up the remaining fraction. Our budget drivers, the operating budget at 125.6. The FY23, operating budget at 125,613,878. The loss of our ESSER and ARPA funds, contractual obligations and inflationary pressures, anticipated turnover, 1 year stopgap to the BEEP revolver account leads to the FY24 superintendent's budget request of $131.8 million. So when we take a look at our enrollment overview, enrollment remains dynamic with an upward trend. Our October of 2022 enrollment is higher than it was in October of 21. And you see that those numbers reflected here. And our total enrollment for school year FY23 has increased by over 40 students since the start of the school year. We've netted. And as of February 7th, we have 7,092 students enrolled in the district as of this time. And so you can see we've grown since January as well. It's also important to note that as of February 7th of this year, 300 students have completed the registration process in anticipation of entering kindergarten in September of 23. And last year at this time, the completed registration was at 215. So we are anxiously awaiting our enrollment department to continue updating us with those numbers. Mobility and churn continue to remain important data points with our enrollment. When we look at enrollment shifts in K through 12, if we look back at our point in time in the 2019-2020 school year, and these are October 1 numbers, you see our representative enrollment at each school: Baker at 750, Driscoll at 600, Ruffin Ridley at 888, Heath at 525, Lawrence 679, Lincoln 576, Pierce 842, Runkle at 582, for a total K-8 enrollment of 5,442 students. And if we then look at, so March of 20 is when the COVID hit. And then when we went into post-COVID, not post-COVID, the year immediately following, we noticed, you realize the losses. So each school lost its representative numbers of students compared to the year before. In school year 21-22, we saw a few increases, but again, an overall net loss compared to the previous year of 117 students, again, at October 1. But when we look at our October 22 numbers, this is the first year that we almost every school noticed an increase, with the exception of Pierce, and we're making sure that we are not over enrolling Pierce also, because there were some adjustments that need to happen there. But we're netting at this time compared to last year a positive 130 students. And so I think it's important when we say we're noticing an upward trend, we're starting to really see that in our data. And so when you look at Ruffin Ridley, for example, COVID year at 888, and current year, October 1 now, 825. So within striking or getting closer to where it was pre-pandemic enrollment. So I just wanted to have this as a visual for you all to see what we're talking about in terms of our trajectory there. When we think about, again, what we need to do, what we will be doing as we rectify the budget gap that we have, we're going to continue focusing on master scheduling. How do we become more efficient there? And, we've shared quite a bit about the middle school review and those types of things that are happening. We'll continue refining our FTE assignments to make sure that we are providing services where needed and recognizing efficiencies if we're over. We'll certainly look at section adjustments where needed, recognize savings in retirements and resignations, as well as a big part of what we'll talk about a little bit later, not in specific detail, but globally, a budget gap of $4.8 million will have programmatic implications there. We'll do our best not to, but the reality of it is a budget gap of that size right now would have programmatic implications. And certainly what I've been talking about in terms of departmental reorganization and recognizing efficiencies there will also do those pieces. So last night at Finance, we shared this this particular slide, and we've updated, and this is the prelude that I gave earlier, is I hope I didn't make any mistakes in these calculations down at the bottom where we filled in the slides. So when we look at FY24, our town allocation is 127 million, essentially. The projected budget or the requested budget that I submitted was $131.8 million. And the initial gap is now coming in at the $4.8 million. If we were, again, globally to look at programmatic adjustments, that includes program review, classrooms, spaces away from classrooms, just sort of a nebulous bucket that we're calling programmatic adjustments at this time of 2.9 million, that then brings our subsequent gap down to $2 million for all practical purposes. Our full day BEEP has no implication for FY24. If we look at then athletic supports, student services supports, again, from the review there, South Brookline fee-free bus and a world language redesign imagination there. Those new initiatives come to just shy of 700,000, and the new then gap is recognized at $2.6 million for a new projected FY24 budget of $129.6 million. Then when we look at FY25, a similar process rolling staff forward, 131.6 million, 138.2 million, with a gap of 6.5 million. The programmatic adjustments carried in FY24 over looks like 3.4 million. And if you recall from last night, these two columns were highlighted yellow, as well as these two columns, because we didn't have our BEEP calculations. And so we believe at this point that in FY24, and again, we'll nail these down more solidly, that will recognize an increase in the cost of BEEP that recognizes increasing the school day to a full day. And then we have various, we've identified what the break-even point would be, as well as the point then that we start generating revenues to build up our fund balance there. So we'll share that information out with you as well. But we believe in FY25 and 26, there will be no additional cost to the operating budget. So again, the inflationary are the natural increases that accompany these shifts will recognize or realize a number of approximately 713,000. And when you add those to the gap with the reduction, we come with essentially 4.2 million in FY25 for a total projected budget of 135.8. And then in FY26, going through the similar process, we go from a $9 million gap down to a $6.5 million gap for a total budget of projected budget of 142 million. Mariah, did I miss anything with this explanation?
No, the only thing I wanted to add, that you covered it all perfectly. I just wanted to add, or maybe you said this and I missed it, that athletics had an additional request. Yep, that they talked. Do you want to describe it, or do you want me to describe it?
You can take it.
Okay. That what's here in the chart reflects their level 1 request. However, last night there was a really compelling, in my opinion, presentation by the athletics director at the high school. And he talked about what would be the next, what they described as level 2. And the staffing for level 2, that the presentation is available on the website for anyone who wasn't there, and the recording, I believe, will be available shortly if it's not yet. But essentially, the additional staffing would enable the supervision of all of the 100+ coaches that we have, supervision and professional development that support athletics, as well as enabling a whole host of things, including one that I was particularly found compelling, which was, it's called unified programming, which is essentially, for anyone who doesn't know, the ability to have students of all abilities participate in the same athletics programming, which I think would be really impactful, and I would love to see that happen. So what I had said, but we didn't take a vote on it as a subcommittee, but I was thinking perhaps in year 1, we would support level 1, and level 1 would allow them to bring their staff back to sort of it's basically FY15 levels, because they'd been cut drastically about 7 years ago. And then perhaps in year 2 of the override, add on that additional staff once they've sort of onboarded for that first year. So that's the only thing I wanted to voice over. And if we went that route, that would increase years 2 and 3 by about 120,000 each.
Valerie, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, David. So I just want to understand, is this now all tier one then, Mariah? What's
I
on
think
the
that's
slide
something
right
school
now?
committee, I think that's something school committee needs to decide, but I think that the conversation we had, and of course Linus needs to decide too, but I think the conversation we had last week was about how we really thought these things that had been sort of described as level 2 were important. And if you're asking me my opinion, I think that we should do it all as a level 1. We should have one request, but that's just my opinion and we should discuss it.
Okay, I mean, I guess like on the athletics piece, is that the only thing that was on the slide that was moved? I'm just trying to see if there's anything else that was moved from yesterday.
The only other thing is the dollar amounts for full day beep have been filled in,
Right, okay,
but the dollars didn't change because it's at 0, 0.
okay. And there's no escalation on the bus? I mean, I support the bus. Do we not think that gas or anything else is going to cost us more in 25 and 26?
I think what we have here is we have 2 sets of numbers that we're working from, and we think that this right now we're going to refine that tighter, Val. And again, it's a great question about how to account for those aspects of it, but we think that this is sufficient right now. Once we refine, I think we'll still be ahead of where we need to be.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing, and I had thought about that, but I believe that the other conversation was about how the buses were under contract for the next, we just voted to extend the option for the bus contract, which would fix our rates. So I thought we maybe didn't need to.
Ellen?
Thank you. I guess I'm a little concerned how programmatic adjustments, 2.9 million is a lot of money. And then is the 2.9 million then added to the 3.1 million? Is that the way I'm reading this? Or is that another 3.1 million taken out and then 3.25 million taken out?
You're not adding it year to year. There's a $200,000 increase from 24 to 25, and then a $150,000 increase from 25 to 26.
Because we've eliminated something in the first year. And
That's
it's
the idea,
compounding.
and it's just compounding, right?
Yeah. Okay, I guess at some point I'd like to know what those programmatic adjustments are before we vote the actual budget.
Yes, that's fair, Helen. And I think once we get further down the road, that's the then unpacking, because right now we're still so early. We don't know what the governor's numbers are.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're nebulously lumping what we feel would or what I feel would get us down into the ballpark again. And you see where our original, what the original request is here. And the reality of it is if our numbers remain here, then we're still just as far apart. So
Right.
how much of an override ask then do we go for in that sense also? And so that we also have, so, and again,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just said, and I think the committee, just needs to have that level of conversation, because right now, the budget vote that you'll see at the end is we're, again, the very early preliminary vote that's similar to what we did last year, and we'll continue to realize efficiencies and such, but
Sure.
sooner rather than later, and maybe tonight, because the administrator would like to go before the select board, or is going before the select board next week to say what the anticipated override numbers are. So it's, we're the victims right now, are being held to these very tight and aggressive timelines. Don't necessarily align with school planning and process timelines too also.
I must say, I'm quite disturbed by the town, giving us one number, and usually the number is lower in December, and then reducing it by 300,000. That's never happened. And I'm quite concerned about that. So,
Suzanne?
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Can we just talk a little bit about this override request? The town's going to ask for a 3-year override. Is that my understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
And so is that amount from the school, this 2.6 plus 4.1 plus 6.5? So over 3 years,
It's not
we're
plus
asking for.
in the same way. That's not the way the overrides are calculated. Basically, the first year
Okay,
it would be like, let me,
Mariah, can I pause you for just a second?
yeah, go for it.
If you can hear us, you're freezing a little bit, so I don't know if your shutting off your video will help make sure you hear everything.
okay, I'll shut that off. Yeah.
Basically,
Okay.
think about it like the first year is that amount would be requested, and then the next year that amount carries forward anyway, and there's another 1.5 million that gets added for the second year, and then in the second year the 4.1 gets carried forward, and there's another 2.4 million that would get added. The difference between the 4.1 and the 6.5. Does that help explain it, Suzanne?
Yeah, that does, Mariah. Thank you. So essentially it's 2.6 plus whatever that would be, less.
Yeah, the
than
1.5 plus the 2.4.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And again, Suzanne, I think your question is, the context is here up here, this initial gap would be sort of max. And the question is, what's reasonable in that sense? And here's what I would say sort of the minimum, if we want to think of it that way. So your question about what numbers do we want to request? I would say fall, this is the range of possibility, if that makes sense.
Linus, I would just add on that it's actually the worst case scenario,
Absolutely.
so to speak, is
Yep.
the initial gap line plus the new initiatives line. So it's actually closer to almost $10 million because we've added those in as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Any other questions there?
Just one, Mariah, so tell me if my math is wrong. Is it essentially like a 5.4 versus a 6.5-ish in the override ask? If we included all the other pieces?
5.4 versus 6. You mean in year 3?
Well, the ask as it appears, right? So I'm just trying to understand what you were explaining to Suzanne, right? That it's a carrying number, that it's the differential.
So in your, I don't understand where the 5.4 came from. Tell me where you're getting 5.4.
I'm looking at if we didn't add in the new initiatives.
Right, then it would be like 5.8 or something. Yeah, the
5.8.
7. Yes, 5.8 exactly.
And then
Which you can
6.
see. Yep, the
Yeah.
subsequent gap row shows you the 5.8.
Okay,
Exactly.
got it.
And just to
Thanks.
give a little bit of context, each $2.8 million is about 1% on taxes. So in the first year, this is a little bit less than 1%. And then it adds on a little bit, like a fraction of a percent in year 2, and then it adds in about a little bit less than another percent in year 3.
Suzanne, is that a fresh hand?
No, sorry.
How
Stephen?
much is the town ask? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Linus. Just to clarify, so The programmatic adjustments line corresponds in the last presentation to tier 1. The new initiatives line corresponds to tier 2. So getting back to Helen's first question, can you just give an example of something that the programmatic adjustments excuse me, line includes?
Can I just correct you? The programmatic adjustments line, no, the initial gap is what we were calling level 1 before.
Okay, then I don't understand what the programmatic adjustments line refers to.
So programmatic adjustments would refer to what we are nebulously calling essentially reductions to PSB to lessen the initial gap. So you can think of it as generically as classroom consolidations, if there are savings that can be realized there. When we start talking about programs, I won't call any specific names for obvious reasons, but you can plug in what programs could be impacted there.
Okay.
So that would be then a reduction that occurs. And when you look at that, and again, as Mariah said, escalating these through the period, then these then become sort of the new gap.
Okay, so then thanks, Mariah. Thanks, Dr. Guillory and Mariah. So as you were saying, then Mariah, the initial gap corresponds to tier 1. So in no scenario then have we built in support for instance, any enrichment program or subsidies to after school programs.
Correct.
Okay, so if we were to build any further support, we wouldn't have a tier 3, but we would be removing additional programs. That's our current strategy for presentations.
At this point, that's the way that would look.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry, I can't get my hand up.
Go ahead, Ellen.
So if this is what we're thinking of for our override ask, what is the town thinking of?
I'm not
Have
sure the
they come
town
out?
has circulated that publicly yet, Helen.
Okay, all right, fine.
But Helen,
Um,
essentially, our numbers are being indexed off of the towns to an extent because a town school partnership, the 60-40 split. So we're trying to stay in alignment with that.
I
Well,
would say
we're
that
trying.
this does not currently reflect a 60-40 split
No.
with the most current sort of town asks, but it is roughly in line, I would say. But the town numbers really aren't public.
These numbers, I just want to be super clear, not to too much correct David, but just these numbers reflect the actual articulated needs as we've gone through this process, not just a ratio related to what the town ask is.
Right, so these numbers don't match up with it, but in terms of when we're thinking about what's going to be a viable ask and estimating what further adjustments may need to be made, we look at that indexing of 60-40.
Well, I think that if we were to exceed the 60 wildly, there would certainly be issues. And from what I understand, we are not doing that right now. I would just highlight a couple points. There's the town portion, and then the vote in May will also include the pure STED exclusion. So there are 3 components to the ask that are coming to the voters. Although I believe there'll just be 2 votes, right? There'll be one for the debt exclusion and then one for the operating override, possibly a 2-tiered vote for the operating override. But the town and schools will be 1 vote, as I understand it, for the operating.
Now, Mariah, if the town is going to propose a tiered override, at least for their side, I'm curious about your rationale for why perhaps we shouldn't do the same.
I'm reflecting what I heard as the committee and can you stop, please? Sorry. As the committee and the tenor of the conversation last week around how we find multiple of these things to be really important. And so do we want to have them be in level 2, or do we really want to bring them up to priority and pull them into that level 1?
I certainly agree with you there, but Stephen's point around enrichment opportunities, subsidies for after school programs I think is well taken. That's not currently reflected here. So I wonder if that would then become our tier 2, especially if the town side is contemplating a tier 2.
We haven't had a significant discussion of enrichment opportunities and vetting in the same way that we have done around the rest of this. And we haven't, while we have talked about some of the after school stuff, I think we also haven't done that same level of discussion. Of course, it's up, my personal sense is that we have done a lot of talking about what we were planning on doing, and to throw things in at the last minute wouldn't be my preferred approach.
I agree with you, Mariah, but I'm also concerned about what's being cut out in programmatic, and we're not really putting that back in, or some of
Remember
it.
that
We
tonight's
don't need
vote
all
is,
of it.
remember tonight's vote is going to have, and Linus, maybe we should skip ahead to pull up the vote language, but it's going to be the vote for the 131.8 number. You're not being asked to vote any lower number tonight.
Okay. No, but if the town is already putting out what the override is, it's just, everything is sort of backwards because we still don't know what we're getting from the state. You know, it's crazy. This is, you know, like I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
It is frustrating, I agree, to have to be making these decisions at this point in time.
Yes, especially when we so many pieces.
All right, so are there any other questions there?
I guess I would just like to continue to reserve in this process room should more generosity come in from the state, additional initiatives under what is now tier 2 in the name of excellence in the public schools. For instance, enrichment programming or subsidies to after school programming. But I recognize this is an iterative process. I just want to make sure that what's currently listed under tier 2 doesn't represent the entirety of our vision of excellence in PSB.
Helen, is that a new hand?
Yes, it is. I had one other question. You know, if in the request for the override, if we were to put $1 million more into the first year, the compounding would be much better and we could ask for less in the following years. No? Hello?
You're saying that you don't mean compounding, but you mean the year-to-year growth would be less than the other years. That is correct.
Yeah, but the monies would compound over the years, because if you put in a percent in, you know, more in 24 as opposed to 25, you have that in the following year as a base.
Yes, it would be.
And to take it away from the following years. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I thought that the numbers year by year largely reflected our predictions about the size of our structural deficit in each of these 3 years.
They're based on need and what we see as new initiatives.
But the new initiatives don't change much from year to year. What does change from year to year is that top gap between our allocation and our budget. So, and that's really what's driving that year-on-year increase in the override request.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Valerie? I think I saw your hand up.
It was, I just want to clarify, just following up on what Stephen said. My understanding is we need to be solid on this tonight. Is that right, Mariah?
Solid on what? Just to be clear.
What our override ask is going to be, whether we're in what we're identifying as tier 1, if we're identifying any tier 2.
It's my understanding that, and Linus, correct me if you disagree or you've heard otherwise. It's my understanding that the select board is expecting Linus to come to them on Tuesday with rough order of magnitude numbers. You know, I don't think that precludes adjustments, but I do think that if it forecloses wild swings. Does that answer the question, Val?
Yeah, that was my understanding. It was really for Stephen, who was asking about some things that I think are, fairly costly. And so that would, I think, change it somewhat wildly.
Well, I think, and to that point, there's a couple of things. There's the things that Stephen's talking about, which have, curricular and staffing impacts that would be very difficult probably to turn on a dime for July without all the planning. But that aside, we also have changes that we don't know about, as Helen and Linus mentioned earlier, in the governor's budget and what other changes might be made. So I think that it's not to say that there won't be adjustments made to the budget. There may be room.
Right, but probably not through the override process, I guess, is what
I think that that's probably correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Val.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, we're looking at a projected budget number that you want us to vote on, but we're not actually selecting programmatic adjustments, and we're not really picking tier 1 and tier 2 at this point tonight, is my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, we're not, the number that you're voting on doesn't reflect any programmatic adjustments. Imagine it would be that line zeroed out. So you're voting that higher number, not a lower number. You're
Right.
voting the 131.8 number.
Right.
But I think
So, I mean, we're not having the discussion tonight about the adjustments and what's going to be tier 1 or tier 2.
correct.
We're not
Okay.
having the discussion about adjustments. We can have the discussion about tier 1 and tier 2. I don't know why we couldn't say to her, like, I think it's totally that we could say, do we agree that we want to push everything into one override ask?
But I don't know that this reflects all that we've been talking about in terms of new initiatives and what we would
This has
ask
been
for.
the stuff we've been talking about for like the past month.
Right, but I'm hearing more things coming up as well. So, like, when are we going to do that, I wonder?
Well, since Linus has to present to the select board on Tuesday, this would be our last opportunity to hash it out. It just didn't seem like anything had reached that level of development other than the things that are on this grid.
Suzanne, it's Nancy. Are you talking about the stuff that Stephen was talking about? In other words,
Well, I'm talking about what Stephen's talking about, Nancy, and I'm talking about, last week we talked about some things on page, I think it was 9 and 10.
oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's not in here. We talked about that last week. So, there are some things that we've kind of talked about, but I don't know that I don't know. I mean, maybe this is what Linus is recommending, and the others, we would revisit if we got additional monies. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yep, I hear you.
I would ask it this way. So within tier 2 currently are priorities that I think were advocated to us that the advocates made a strong and reasonable case, but they don't exemplify principles that we started out with, right? So potentially there could be a great number of these things. So it feels to me somewhat arbitrary. And I could think of other examples of activities or programs that could wind up in tier 2. Enrichment programs feels very much to me like of a piece with some of what's currently in year 2. But what I really want to do is take a step back and ask, the process by which items should fall into year 2 would be the superintendent's strategic plan, right? But that's not going to be completed until after this process is done. So what I'm most interested in is making sure that Dr. Guillory gets to drive the process by which those activities are identified and selected and moved into this plan. So what I want to better understand is how the strategic process aligns with the process that leads to an override. Can someone help me understand how these things will come together? Because what if, for instance, Dr. Guillory's strategic plan results in the recognition that, for instance, enrichment programming is really a major gap, and what needs to happen is strong funding to ensure that students who are bored in school and are not getting what they need to be challenged more. This needs to be strongly funded, and this is a significant activity that needs to be put into the budget. How does that square with the next 3 years worth of programming? How does that work? I recognize that this is simply the timeline that we're being dealt, but how do you, Dr. Guillory, or Mariah, how do you on finance think about this process and how this should work?
So I agree with, I recognize the challenge that you presented, and so that we're presented with collectively. So similarly to how we engage in the budgeting process, once we have our strategic plan in place, then we start building the budget that would start recognizing those items. So let's say that some form of an enrichment challenge program becomes one of those higher priorities, then we build that into the budget request and the budget ask.
Now, but for 27 or for 25?
That would be for the strategic planning process would come out of the hopper with some big goals at the end of this year. We then have to think about implementation. So is it reasonable to try to get those things built up for FY25, or do we say we target those for FY26? But the reality of it is that we can't just add wholeheartedly to the plate without saying, well, what needs to adjust or come off there? So they're not mutually exclusive also. And I think that's part of the challenge that we may have experienced over time, is if we add, that means we constrict, and we're all competing for the same amount of time. So, and then thinking about the reviews that we currently have going on is what efficiencies can we realize internally also that would make room for these other initiatives as well. I liked Helen's, I think Helen asked the question about do we increase or put a plus up in the earlier year so that then we have some buffer room in the out years as well. And so I think, that's the guidance that would be helpful for me going into preparing for this, because I don't want to tell the select board something that we haven't had a conversation here with and that you're in support of. That doesn't make sense. And that's not helpful. But I think at the same time is recognizing, and again, if we don't need, then we won't build our request to that. Also, and I think that's the other commitment that we have to make, is we won't take more than we actually need, and we have to reestablish and build that trust within the community as well.
I what you're saying. I guess I just feel like we're being asked to vote on a ballpark for a budget that has a tier 2 of priorities that look good but don't represent the entirety of a vision yet, because that process isn't complete, but but we're requesting a 3-year override. So I'm struggling to figure out how to think of how to vote on this. Mariah, are you gonna address my concern?
Yes. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna respond. I don't know if it'll address your concern. I think that Linus and I believe maybe Andy was there, had some conversation about this early on. And I think all of us would agree with you. Everyone would. There's great anxiety to make PSB into the ideal school system of all of our minds, starting next year, as soon as strategic plan is done, right? But the reality is that it takes time to build these programs, and 3 years might feel like a long time, but it's not, right? It's not a long time. And while for every student, every day is that one day that they have these things, this is a big system and we need to make sure that we're leaving the time, building the time in to have the strategic planning happen. Frankly, make sure that we have the deputies, not just interim deputies, but the deputies in place as well to be able to do some of this and the staffing and then move on to actually being able to deploy. Just picking on the example of ECS, it's a big decision to decide that we're putting ECS back in. And so I wouldn't feel comfortable making that decision without a lot of guidance from Linus and Grace and the other members of our OTL team as to how that would look and what that would be like, asking principals about what that would mean in terms of like their staffing or their scheduling or whatever, right? Like, and so I don't want us to be making decisions off the sort of what feel a little bit like off the cuff or something like that. I do hear what you're saying about FY, maybe the out year of FY26, and should we be putting some amount in there to allow for some flexibility in that year? And I'm not sure how I feel about that yet, but I will just want to urge that we give Linus the time he needs to build all of these things and not push strategic plan outcomes in, starting in July, like starting in 3 months or starting in 15 months from now, because there's so much that's already built into what we're talking about here already through these new initiatives.
Valerie?
Yeah, so I just want to say, I mean, it's a little bit of what Mariah was saying. I think we all agree on wanting to get to that state of excellence, or the most excellent education for PSB that we can, but it's hard for me to wrap my mind around how to add that to an override ask when we're looking at approximately $3 million in cuts to maintenance of effort, to current maintenance of effort. I can't really wrap my head around asking the voters for money to add on to something else when we're looking at potential significant cuts to maintenance of effort. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep, that weighs heavily, Val.
Anyone else? All right, then maybe we should pull up the vote language.
Sure thing. So this, you've seen, the reason that we are taking this vote, again, just to reorient, is that it's written in our town bylaws. And again, we reference section D of our policy manual, again, about the process and the budget adoption procedures. And so herein lies the vote. Voted, the superintendent's preliminary budget is $131,864,685, and the town allocation is currently $127,005,124, reduced from $127,323, $127,323,184 as of December 15th. The school committee will continue working with the superintendent, select board, and town administrator to align these numbers through identification of additional efficiencies and revenues, including an operating override.
All right, would someone like to move this? Andy moves it. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mariah. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Oh, sorry, Nancy?
I vote yes.
Okay. All right, then it's unanimous. And that now brings us to our next agenda item, presentation of school improvement plans. And we are joined by Lincoln Principal Brian Denizio.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm here also with Alejandra Traub. Alejandra is a member of our Lincoln School Site Council and also completing an administrative internship this year through Boston College and getting the experience of presenting to a school committee as part of that experience. So thanks for having us both here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and okay. So these are the members of our Lincoln School Site Council for teacher reps, for parent reps. We are going to be sharing tonight year 2 of a plan we first voted and adopted at the conclusion of the 2020-2021 school year. We intended it then to be a multi-year plan and have continued to revisit the action steps as kind of warranted by student needs and the realities of life at Lincoln and life in schools in the Commonwealth. I also think you'll note too that there's some overlap in the work and overlap in the action steps you'll see across our goals. And that integration of the work is important. I think it speaks to the relevancy of these goals and that they touch so many facets of the school experience at Lincoln. In terms of budgetary impact, I won't go too deeply into the details of this, but the items in our school improvement plan are funded out of a mix of our workshop items and supply line items, while also making use of district resources for items such as investigations, M-Class, Haggerty, purchasing of new decodable text. We're also supported and using data from the Panorama Universal Screener, as well as supporting our 6th and 7th grade advisory work with the Wayfinder curriculum. So goal 1, you see here, is to take a multi-year and systematic approach to identifying and ameliorating gaps in learning due to pandemic schooling. So when we first wrote this goal, I think we didn't have a crystal ball, but we did sure have the idea in our heads that the work of unpacking the impact of a couple of years worth of pandemic schooling was and should take a while, and that our students in particular shouldn't feel stressed or shamed about the reality of the fact that they just didn't have the kinds of opportunities we would have wanted to provide them for a while. And so it's about both giving students and staff the calmness and the grace to build back, but focus on relationships first and leverage those in the name of identifying the unique needs of each of our students. So in terms of our actions for this year in support of this goal, it really began last spring with our thinking about our schedule. The way in which we use time in the building is our most valuable asset and a real statement of what we value. And so we went through an exercise with our K-8 staff last spring where I asked them with the caveat that you're not going to get exactly the schedule you create here, but I gave them the components of the schedule and asked them to what would be in the ideal schedule for you, and then met to unpack why, right? What were the values behind that? The result was a schedule that, really supported both the consistency of our Tier 1 instruction in grade levels that wished for it. We built in a win block, a what I need block, and also supported using our math specialists for in-class support in supporting the rollout of the new investigations curriculum, rather than just exclusively for pulling students out for math support. Another big lever for us has been this year the implementation of the M-Class Universal Screener in literacy. That's over the 3 points throughout the year, yielding to us a rich set of information about all of our students as readers in grades K through 2. We also last year and this year purchased a site-wide license for the Lexia program. Formerly, that was a program available only to students in our special education programming, and also in summer programming. Teachers who worked in summer programs and just saw the impact of it, saw it was a great resource. And so for the last 2 years, with the support of our literacy coach, Jill Dempsey, have been rolling out Lexia school-wide. This additional data that we have available to us has kind of helped us revisioning the way in which we're running our literacy support meetings K through 5. I think that we, for a while, were exclusively holding meetings around, who needed intervention and who didn't. We're able to have a lot more nuanced conversation now, where we're looking at the totality of a grade level. We're looking at what are the things that are, who are the students who are most in need of out-of-class literacy support, and then either what are the things that can happen for them in the classroom that's a complement, or what are the other kind of in-class interventions that our gen ed classroom staffing provide, and how can literacy coaches and literacy specialists be a support in both providing resources, helping them to do good data collection and progress monitoring, or come in and even model. Finally, in this area, we've this year begun using some Title I funding for additional small group learning opportunities. Teachers are doing a wide range of activities here. Some are doing double doses of phonics in kindergarten. There is a art and SEL programming going on for students in 2nd and 3rd grade. There is our 5th grade team has rotating groups where they're working both in math, in writing, and also executive functioning. So there's a lot of really fantastic supports being built in by our Lincoln-based educators to meet with kids before school or after school who maybe need some additional at-bats. I'm gonna now turn it over to Alejandra. She's gonna go through progress monitoring around goal 2.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us and for letting me have this experience of presenting to the school committee. Our second goal is to create a culture of care and mindfulness appropriate to each learning, educator, and caregiver that helps us build lifelong relationships in a supportive community. When we first wrote this goal, we were thinking through the lens of a return to school that was hopefully more normal than the previous years. And we began to talk about what are the traditions, the experiences that Lincoln students and faculty and family members were able to have together throughout a school year that would help them feel connected to Lincoln as the school, to their teachers, to each other, and for the families to feel connected to the building as well. So this year, we've been working on bringing back some of the initiatives that we had done before the 2019-2020 school year, but also starting some brand new initiatives. One of our biggest returns for this school year has been the return of field trips, with an expansion to include not just content-based trips, which had been in place prior to the 2019 school year at Lincoln, but also to build more community building experiences during the fall season for students. At this point in time, all of our students in grade levels 1 through 8 have had at least one experience outside of Lincoln into the Brookline or greater Boston community. Some of these have included the 8th grade had a canoe trip at the beginning of the year as a team building exercise between students, but also between students and staff. And it had some time to debrief about what their experience at Lincoln had been so far in their previous years and what they were hoping to get out of their final year together. We also had our 2nd graders as well as our 6th and 7th graders go to Wheelock for a performance of Matilda, which led to some great English language arts connections, not only between the students, but also between the 2nd grade team and our middle school ELA team as well, and talking about how that experience of live theater connected to students' learning of English language arts in the classroom. Some of the new initiatives that we've started this year is that with the newly installed Climate and Culture Committee, we're launching 2 new initiatives. The first is piloting buddy classrooms, and the second is the launch of a student council in the middle school grades. Earlier this fall, I had the opportunity through my internship as well to go over to Heath and have consultations with some of the things that they have been working on with their Climate and Culture Committee, and then brought some of that knowledge back to our Climate and Culture Committee. So we decided to adapt and consult with them on some of the things that we should be trying. So the first thing that we began was a pilot classroom buddy program. So each classroom K through 5 is paired up with someone in the upper grade, so a 6 through 8 classroom, and classrooms meet together in their buddy groups this year bi-monthly, and then we're hoping to move to a monthly model for the 23-24 school year. Each time that the classrooms meet, we're using one of our Lincoln School core values, curiosity, creativity, and compassion, for students to have a shared experience. And our Climate and Culture Committee has been able to put together the programming to ensure that teachers are able to easily implement this with varying grade levels. So on the committee, we have members of K through 2 teaching staff, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, as well as guidance and special education staff. So we're able to have a myriad of different perspectives and thinking about how to help kids make connections with other students who are in different grade levels from them. And then finally, this past November, we launched the first in a long, long time, perhaps ever, Lincoln Student Council, first open to students in grades 6, 7, and 8, with the goal of having these students plan community gatherings for grade level bands. We had over 50 students in the middle school interested and have therefore split up into 3 different committees. Brian and myself lead 2 of those committees, and the third is led by Heather Pino, who's our middle school French teacher. The students meet weekly in their committees and began planning for the first community gatherings. This past week, we had our very first community gathering for grades 3, 4, and 5. And during this meeting, we continued with the theme of compassion from our January buddy meeting. It had an acknowledgement of holidays and celebrations, a class highlight for one of our 5th grade classes, and all around time to be together as an extended morning meeting. This upcoming Monday, we will have the K through 2 meeting, and then the 6 through 8 meeting will follow. I'm going to turn it back over to Brian for our 3rd goal.
Thank you. So goal 3 centers on supporting student sense of efficacy and belonging. And we wrote this with student efficacy and belonging center. There's a graphic that goes with it that's not included here, but the bottom line is that centered in the middle is student efficacy and belonging, and surrounded are overlapping the educators, the systems, the curriculum, and families that work in support of those things. And so we spent a lot of time last year drilling down into the idea of student efficacy and belonging, right? The idea of, can I do school? Can I do the things that school is asking of me and that the adults there are asking of me? And belonging. Do I feel like I have connection to my peers, to the adults? Do I feel as if school is a place that sees me for who I am? One of the key levers we settled on through some exploration last year was the idea that the feedback students receive is so critical, both to their sense of efficacy. Can I do the things I need to do as a student, and belonging? And so from there, we pivoted into looking at both our grading practices, and then also better aligning our expectations, kind of our non-content behaviors and expectations in K through 5. So in K through 5, an example of this may be like the level of independence that's expected from kindergarten across through 5th grade, about materials management, about, can you get ready independently, or do you need support? How much time is expected for it? We realized that our work was so often siloed and made even more so by COVID, and that the expectations we may have are maybe not entirely in a line anymore. And so we've spent time at faculty meeting trying to bring those things into a vertically aligned and articulated set of expectations that once we can get clear, then we can make clearer to students. Because students' sense of, does my teacher get me? Am I doing what my teacher wants? May be impacted because our expectations are a little bit out of line, right? And not, or not clearly communicated, or not clearly communicated from the grade level above us. In our middle school, where we're actually giving, right, where kids start to get their traditional grades, A through E, A through F, we've been following in the path of colleagues over at the Lawrence School and engaged this fall in reading of the text Grading for Equity, where we're looking at the ways in which the grading practices that we experienced when we were students, that we were taught in our graduate programs, and that basically it's forever been that way. The way that those don't align with our values, right? The way that distilling a kid's experience down to a number 4 times a year and then a letter doesn't align with everything we're trying to communicate about what learning is for and what it's about. And so the conversations we've been having this fall, rooted in this text, have been really unifying and incredibly powerful. And we're now moving from the kind of philosophical, questions about like, okay, we know we don't like our current practices, but what do we do about it? And so the work of the next, few months and really into the next school year forward is, what are some common practices that we can adopt that make our grading more transparent and more equitable? And with an eye towards how can we focus the things that the feedback we're giving students and the things we're giving them feedback on to be about what standards are you meeting, what knowledge are you acquiring, and not so much leaning on issues of homework or of task completion or of class participation or behavior and other things that inherently have bias baked into them. And then the last part in terms of how we're supporting students' sense of belonging and connectedness to each other and to adults at school is through the continued implementation of dedicated time for social emotional learning. In K through 5, that's in morning meeting, and in grades 6 and 7, that's taking the form of an advisory block once a week, where we're using the Wayfinder curriculum I referenced earlier. We're tracking and been pleased with the impact we're seeing in panorama survey data this year versus last year. Versus last fall, our middle schoolers we saw a 10% increase in the percentage of them reporting protective amount of school belonging. We're at 82% of students reporting in middle school feelings of self-efficacy. So it's bearing fruit, which is really fantastic to see. So I will move on to the questions portion of things, and thank you for your time and attention. I'm going to stop sharing and go from there.
All right, who has questions for Mr. Genizio? Or comments? Mariah?
Brian, I need to apologize because I've got a sick little kid here, and so I didn't get I was sort of listening, but also getting whispered to. But I just wanted to compliment you and Alejandra, because I think you're the first and only principal we've had so far who had a collaborative presenter. And I'm really, I was struck by that. And so I want to thank you and you, Alejandra, for coming to present to us, and to you, Brian, for giving her that opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariah.
Nancy?
Hi, I just wanted to piggyback on what Mariah said and say, I love the fact that you're collaborating with other schools as well. We're reading so much about how kids have backslid during the past couple years. And I love that you're meeting with these kids where they learn, as opposed to just following what everybody's always done all along. So I just want to say this is terrific. This is great. I was really, I'm having a tough day. So I was really cheered up by by what you're doing. And I just wanted to say thank you. You're doing a marvelous job. That was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I hope your day gets better.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Stephen?
I'll just pitch in there with my usual literacy questions. Principal Dizio, I just wondered if you were working with any other schools on literacy data monitoring. I know you talked about the work you're doing with Lexia in particular. Are you able to work with other schools to talk through the MClass screener or the data you're collecting around Lexia? I think it was Lawrence. I think it was Principal Crowley who talked to us about their work on their SIP around data gathering through Lexia. Are you able to work together with them on that?
Yeah, so ironically enough, our literacy coaches,
oh yeah, Jill Dempsey used to be
Jill
able to
Dempsey and Diane Wendell are both they work part-time at Lincoln and part-time at Lawrence. And
oh,
so
that's right. And Jill was the one who pioneered Lexia at Lawrence, right?
absolutely, yes. And talk with me about the how valuable it would be, and then it was worth exploring a school-wide license at Lincoln. And that, it's on the one hand, as you've maybe heard administrators talk for years now, like shared staff is a challenge. But one of the benefits that comes with it, though, is this shared perspective, right? And this cross-pollination of ideas, and learning both about programs and about approaches to how to look at the data that can be so fruitful. So, through those relationships, that's happening.
Okay, that's great. Just another call that would be great to get at some point, hopefully this year, a readout on some of the data we've collected around literacy education, because there are so many SIP-based initiatives, it seems like, specifically around looking at the data that we're gathering. It should be great to get a presentation on all of them.
Nancy, did you have another question or comment? I'm not sure if that's a fresh hand. If not, Mariah.
Thanks. Yeah, I did have one question actually, and it was about Wayfinder. I believe we heard that ASA is also using Wayfinder, and I actually had a similar question to Stephen, if you were collaborating on the deployment of Wayfinder for your SEL for middle school, because that's what it is, right? It's the 6th grade SEL curriculum, if I'm recalling.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, and also Matt Dubois, who is just kind of a person who's everywhere and does a lot of things, leads professional development opportunity, kind of like drop-in professional development opportunities for teachers who are using the Wayfinder curriculum. So there's some good, I think, cross-pollination happening that way as well.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, so thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Nizio. We're now going to move on to Pierce with Principal Jamie Adolf.
Hi, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to offer the context that last year we did something fairly unusual and we wrote a 1-year school improvement plan. You may remember that last year I was in an interim role and it seemed like not the best choice to write a multi-year school improvement plan for a potential other principal to inherit. And so I'll be walking through this 1-year plan. And right now our school site council is also reviewing it as we think about drafting our upcoming 3-year plan. So with that context, I will share my screen and move this. All right. Is that coming through okay? Perfect. Okay. So we have a fairly large school council. I'm not going to read you the names, but you can see, oh, here, let me hide all of you too, so that you don't have to see yourselves there. So we have a fairly large school council. We were completing a 3-year SIP last year, drafted that 1-year plan, and we are using the data from that plan to begin thinking about a new plan that will begin in September of 2023 and take us through June of 2026. Oops, and why is it? There we go. So in terms of budgetary impacts, last year we requested and received a budget of $2,000 for this school year to support some online software subscriptions and software purchases that would support struggling students. One unknown when we did that was that there were a lot of subscriptions for things that we don't have licensing agreements with. So that has been a little bit of an obstacle in spending that money. We're learning as we go this year, and we'll be more mindful of that moving forward. We also requested and received a budget of $2,500 for this year to send educators to professional development workshops and conferences that tie with our school improvement plan goals, and staff have been making excellent use of that. We also requested and received funds to allow us to fund some summer work last summer that was tied to our school improvement plan goals, as well as both general homework clubs and homework clubs that provided targeted small group support for struggling students. The latter half of this, those homework club funds, will not be fully utilized this year due to some challenges we've had with staffing. So with that, we'll turn to our goals. So our first goal is to ensure that Pierce educators have the training, resources, and support they need to achieve a high level of growth in MCAS, specifically for students who identify as Black or African American. Last year, we really did a lot of in-depth data review for our students who identify as Black or African American, and started some very focused work in supporting those students. And we decided we wanted to carry that work over into this year's school improvement plan. And so that included two different components, one around teacher supports and the other around student opportunities. So we built professional development and culturally responsive teaching practices right into our school day. We've been using a team approach to data review through the creation of a PLC, or a data team in our case. And we've been providing support for teachers in determining some best instructional steps, including support for progress monitoring and review of standards through the lens of MCAS question item analysis to look for trends both in our performance on the test and in potential areas of the test that are of concern. And then in terms of increasing student opportunities, we did ask for that funding for after-school tutoring and homework clubs, for technology, and have been thinking a lot about how we can help build student confidence and competence through the use of culturally proficient teaching methods. Progress monitoring. This year, we spent quite a bit of time reviewing existing MCAS data. We had hoped to be able to do that over the summer, but the MCAS data was delayed in being released, so we weren't actually able to do that until the fall. We then translated that data into some reports and identified trends and shared all of that with staff. We've also continued the work that we started last year outside of our school improvement plan goal this year in it to support students who identify as Black or African American in achieving an SGP at or above 60 on this coming spring's test. So we talked a lot about what number was a reasonable benchmark here. So SGP helps you measure how much kids are growing relative to like peers, right? So an SGP of 60 means students are growing at a faster than average rate. So that means even if a student is not meeting expectations on the test, if their SGP is at 60 or 70 or 80, that means they're closing that gap faster. You can't reasonably expect a student who's not meeting expectations in one year to be meeting expectations the next. There's a significant path there. So that's why we targeted SGP. We're mirroring a lot of the things this year that we did last year. And last year when we did our analysis, we discovered that 68% of our students who identified as Black or African American had an SGP greater than 60 in one or more subtests in 2022. So what we were doing was working, which validated that we were continuing that. We were also really excited to see that the number of students who identify as Black or African American and met or exceeded expectations on both subtests more than doubled from 2021 to 2022. So again, we're excited to look at the data after this year's assessment, but we're hopeful that we're going to get similar results. We've also been providing job-embedded professional development in collaboration with Janae. We've had 2 staff meetings led by the Office of Educational Equity, and we've provided ongoing PD during meetings. And also our equity team at Pierce will be hosting some of our staff meetings later this spring. Our second goal also is a continuation of some of the work we did last year in response to some of our data. which was to continue the work of building staff capacity for RTI implementation, including the increased use of professional learning communities that focuses on leveraging the diverse expertise of our own staff, as well as a focus group to consolidate and build a robust bank of resources and strategies to most effectively implement RTI. As I know you all know, we have a huge curriculum here in Brookline that's been created over time by a lot of different people. And so leveraging the experts in our building to help people in our building made a lot of sense. We created time for the work through the use of both faculty meetings and collaboration time, and just spent some time digging into and organizing the materials we already had. We've also been, again, leveraging technology for progress monitoring and making sure that the experts on staff have the opportunity and the time to provide job-embedded professional development. So in terms of progress monitoring that, we did have a summer PLC that focused on organizing materials, which they were able to share out, which our new staff have especially found useful. We also planned to design 3 RTI capacity building units, but when we surveyed staff, we actually realized that there were 4 levels of need. So we actually have 4 series. We're in the middle of that now. We've just completed the second of the 4 sessions. So each teacher signed up for one of 4 paths forward to this RTI professional development. And then we're also hosting opportunities to support that learning, that staff meeting learning, in collaboration time. So teachers who feel like they want a little extra time there can sign up. And then finally, not at all surprising, I'm sure, is our plan around making sure that we have good systems of communication as we're planning for a pure school renovation, including temporary relocation. You all have been a part of a lot of those communications. And so for that, we just focused on making sure we were doing monthly communication of project updates with families and engaging in ongoing planning for relocation, both with central office staff, project staff, and the community as a whole. And that brings us to the Q&A.
All right, so who has a question or comment? All right, well then I'll start. So in the context of goal 2, you talked about access to technology resources. Could you expand on that a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are an inordinate number of technologies out there to help teachers with progress monitoring and with data organization. But as anybody who's ever worked in schools knows, it's all well and good to have an idea for what you need, but then to go into the bank of materials on the internet and find the thing you need to help you is an exercise in frustration on a good day. And so we've really just leveraged a lot of our own, again, staff expertise to start gathering those technology tools, vetting them, and sharing them in a way that's coherent and allows teachers who need something to more quickly put their hands on it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments, Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Jamie, for this. Could you just talk a little bit about, I know you talked a lot about MCAS data, but that's grade 3, but we know there's lots going on pre-K3. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing for interventions for those students in the lower grades, and what kind of
You
data?
mean more generally, or as a part of this school improvement plan?
Well, if there's anything part of that school improvement plan, or if not, in general.
Yeah, so we didn't have anything specific to students in the younger grades, because up until this year, we didn't have any universal screeners in K2, and we didn't have any benchmark assessments that were standards based in K2. So we do have access to that panorama data, and that's teacher filled out, and then also our M-class data that we'll be considering for our next school improvement plan. But one of the things that we have been doing as a part of our data team is considering the huge pool of data that we have available and thinking again about how to make that more accessible to teachers. So we do have a data management system in Aspen, and it's not the most intuitive program. And so we've been thinking a lot about how we can make sure that teachers can put data in that's useful and then get that data back out again on the other side. And that's particularly relevant for our K-2 teachers because they're the earliest gatherers of data. And so making sure that that data continues with the child so it can support their ongoing progress and development is something we've been spending a lot of time with.
Yeah, thank you. Can you say, are there other pieces of data that you use in the upper grades besides MCAS? MCAS is not my favorite assessment.
Yeah,
and
it's
so,
it's not our favorite either. And if you looked at our the full explanation for our school improvement plan, we do acknowledge that it is an imperfect measure, and it is also a measure that students need to pass in order to get a high school diploma. And so we do feel an obligation to ensure that all students are well prepared to pass that test. We feel really strongly that as long as it's a requirement, it is our duty to ensure that all students have an opportunity to pass that assessment. That said, we are looking at our MCAS data, correlating it with, for example, our BAS data. So are our students who are not doing well on MCAS also not doing well on BAS? Is it going both ways all the time, only sometimes with subgroups? So we're actually looking at that right now with the current round of BAS data that's coming in. We're also looking a lot at our panorama data. That is not specific to academic progress, but to the whole child. So all of our staff, guidance counselors, and teachers have been receiving professional development on how to access that panorama data so that they can look at trends for their own students. And we're also learning how to use panorama as a tool for tracking what interventions we're making with students. So that's something we're all exploring. And again, to give Matt another shout out, that's another thing Matt is really supportive of. Matt Dubois helps a lot with that as well.
thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Just a very quick question, actually, Jamie, thanks. How many kids at Pierce actually identify as Black or African American and therefore sort of fell under this goal?
So in this particular year, that number was 19. One thing that is important to note, however, is that the way MCAS, or the way the state of Massachusetts identifies Black or African American, is very narrow. So if a student identifies as Black or African American and Hispanic, the state categorizes them as Hispanic. If a student identifies as Black or African American and white, the state characterizes them as multiracial, non-Hispanic. And so that number is very, very small because those are students who identify only as Black and African American. So it looks smaller than it really is, but it's a very narrow focus for us.
I see. So you did, in fact, adopt the state definition in choosing whom to focus on here.
We did, in part because when we were starting to look at this, we wanted something that felt like something we could put our arms all the way around. And so when you're looking at 19 students from 4th grade through 8th grade, because of course we didn't have that data for the 3rd graders until they were in 4th grade, this is a very small number of students for each teacher to keep close tabs on and to think really deeply and thoughtfully about. And so it felt like the perfect size to take on really trying some things and having an opportunity to assess how it worked. Our goal, we've already started talking about this in site council. Our goal as we think about expanding this moving forward is actually to look at all groups who are not performing as one would expect as compared to the whole population. So we are planning to broaden our reach for this in the next round.
Thanks. Yeah, that turned out to be a much more interesting answer than I anticipated.
All right, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much for presenting.
Thanks,
Principal
Jamie.
Luna. And we will now move on to our next item, which is an update on the Heath School renaming efforts with Heath Principal Asa Sevelius.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight, and thanks for, I feel like I was just here a few weeks ago, so I'm glad to be back here at school committee. I first of all have to retract something I said to my student committee earlier today when we were looking over the final product of our presentation. They wanted it to have more pizzazz, and I said, listen, people, this committee isn't interested in pizzazz. And then after spending the last few hours watching this meeting, I thought, I'm wrong. This group loves pizzazz. So here we are to dazzle you. You're going to meet a lot of us tonight. You see a lot of cameras just turned on. We have a couple adults in the room besides myself, but mostly it's kids. We have a very robust student committee helping with the school renaming process. And so those are the voices we really want you to hear tonight. But of course, you're also going to hear from some teachers, and you're going to hear from 2 parents as well who are on the adult committee. So without further ado, here we go. I'll share my screen and you'll be dazzled by our final product for you tonight. All right, here we go. Can everyone see that?
You can,
Awesome.
yes.
Yes, good, thank you. All right, so here we go. The Heath School renaming process. To begin, we created a mission statement a few months ago and have had that on the website. I've been pushing it out to my families. I had it at my SIP presentation a few weeks ago as well. The mission statement is designed to really explain in that nutshell, that elevator speech, why we're moving forward with the school renaming effort. And right now we'll have Rowan, Sophie, and Elisa read our mission statement to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Asa. Heath School, nestled in the Heath School nestled in the Chestnut Hill enclave in Brookline, has played a central role in so many lives for more than 100 years. Generations of children have established their educational foundations here, while their families have turned to this space with great trust, boundless hope, and expectations for excellence. Countless educators have made this place their professional home, dedicating part or all of their careers to the work inside these walls. We have learned in recent years that our school was named for the street on which it originally sat, Heath Street, which in turn was named for a family that owned much of the land surrounding the street. Because the Heath family was also enslavers, our school therefore carries the name of a family that enslaved other people during their time here in Brookline.
Knowing that our beloved school is named indirectly for a family that enslaved other humans has made it increasingly difficult to intentionally promote a vision that aligns with our stated values.
Heath School came to be called Heath somewhat unintentionally. We now have a chance as a community to affirmatively and intentionally choose a new name. We seek collectively to understand our history and the role of slavery in Brookline, the impact of that history on our school, and choose a name that represents us and our aspirations, and reinforces a safe learning environment for those in our care.
Reckoning with this past is essential to building a better future for our students. Renaming our school is part of that process.
Thank you. Our decision isn't made willy-nilly, of course. Our decision is made based on kind of an urgency set forth by the team at the Florida Ruff and Ridley School, for whom we're thankful, and has been affirmed in other ways in the community. And we'll talk about that a little later through other student groups and adult groups as well. The research that really roots our thinking is based on the work of the Hidden Brookline Committee, Dr. Barbara Brown and her committee. And right here on this slide deck, which is up on the school website, there are clickable links and it takes you to the Hidden Brookline site. We'll read from the Heath page and we'll start next with Ms. Gordon.
Hello, everybody. So there were 3 generations in the Heath family for which this research is based. John Heath, his son Ebenezer, and Ebenezer's son Charles. John Heath enslaved 4 people to work on his farms and in his stately home. They were Primus, Kate, Ben Boston, and Dinah. John and Susanna Heath had a son, Ebenezer, and 2 daughters. Ebenezer and his sisters grew up in luxury and came of age in an enslaving home. In 1790, Ebenezer married at age 25, about the time that slavery ended in Massachusetts. When he married, John Heath signed his wealth over to his son. John Heath built Ebenezer and his bride an elegant home just a stone's throw from John Heath's own house. Ebenezer's oldest surviving son was Charles, who married in 1828 and moved to Boston. Some years later, Charles and his family returned to Brookline to live on Heath family land and to build a new house where his grandfather's home had once stood. Charles's home was also a mere stone's throw from his father's.
Now Bruno will share.
First, Ebenezer Heath and then his son Charles inherited the wealth that derived
in part from John Heath's slavery practice. John Heath's social capital was also passed down, first to his son and then to his grandson, giving them entree into elite society where they can make valuable financial and social connections.
Thank you. Francesca.
Heath, a street and then a school. In 1841, the town chose Heath as the name for an existing road, stating that it stretched from the Worcester Turnpike or Boylston Street by Mr. Heath's to the Newton Line. In 1847, the school on that road changed its name from the Middle District School to be more specific, the Middle District School on Heath Street. For a number of years, teachers boarded with the Heaths, who prized their companionship. A few decades later, the school shortened its name to the Heath School, a name that it continues to carry today, even in its new location on Elliott Street.
Thank you. So in our, I'm going to go back. In our process, we have had a lot of conversations. We've taken quite a few polls and Google Forms have been sent out. And one of the most important and exciting was when we sent out invitations to the community, and we had lots and lots of submissions. We didn't have as many submissions as they received for the Florida Ruffin School renaming, Florida Ruffin Ridley School renaming, but we did have about 25 from folks in our school, in the broader community, and a lot of alumni, and then community members submitted names as well. So that was really exciting. And that's when it felt like we were really starting to do something. And so in the next slide, Asha will share some more information about the complete list of nominees.
So here's a list of all the names that were submitted through the public nomination process. There's a range of people, places, feelings, local names, as well as names from around the US, historical people, and people who are still alive today. The student committee was tasked with narrowing the candidates to a few finalists, which will be discussed in the next few slides.
Thank you. Narrowing the field.
Asa, I'm sorry, do you mind just going back to show the list? That was quick and there was a lot of content.
Yes. This is content we've all been looking at for months and months.
Yeah.
So thank you for slowing down.
What are the three asterisks mean?
I'll tell you.
Okay, thank you.
But we're going to get to that actually in the next slides, but it is of note. There's also a hashtag here for Mr. Bernie Pendleton, who was nominated by quite a few people. And he was a former art teacher at Heath School. There's a note down here. He is so appreciative for the consideration, and he respectfully has declined over and over again the honor of being a nominee. But it would be, I think, irresponsible not to include him in the complete list of nominees. Some of these nominees had multiple people submit their names, so we had a much broader kind of pool, but quite a few of the names had 2 or 3 people have that same kind of zeitgeist for a particular candidate. But I will read them. Roland Hayes, Bernard Pendleton, Ellen and William Kraft, Hedy Lamar, Michael Dukakis, Francis Ouimet, Edward Corain, Massasoit, note the 3 asterisks, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, Bill Russell, Manuel Deval Jr., Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Frederick Law Olmsted, Ruth Batson, Sybil Holmes, John Wilson, The Settlement, which is the original name for the neighborhood in which our school sits, Sagamore James, Harmony, Kindness, Judith Human, Charles Sprague Sargent. Those asterisks should actually be up here with Sagamore James, the Quabbin River, and then Harriet Tubman. So narrowing the field, the adults in the adult committee spent a lot of time talking about how are we going to narrow the field. And we had a lot of parameters we wanted to bring to the student committee, but the student committee, once they had a sense of who the candidates were and what we were going for, did a really brilliant job really defining how we were going to find our finalists and our final candidate. And so I'm going to ask Maren and Francesca to read these out loud to us now.
So required by town bylaws, the town said that we had to have a person, place, or event as the name. And then required as recommended by the student committee in partnership with the adult committee members. Ours has to have a connection to Greater Boston and Brookline, has to be a helper, someone who contributed to the community and made a positive impact, has to have a connection to education and or commitment to educating others, and has to be not an Indigenous name, as our school has no historical or current connection to Indigenous peoples other than sitting on Native land. We do not want to appropriate Indigenous names or culture for our own gains.
Nice to have, as recommended by the student committee in partnership with the adult committee members. Represented elsewhere, we strive to recognize those who are not honored elsewhere in our community. Is the candidate a person of color? We strive to recognize those who are historically underinvited into our community. Is the person still living? Has the person passed? The preference is someone who has passed, as we can examine their entire life, contributions, and impact.
Great. Madison, are you here?
Yes.
Great.
In the spirit of reflection and reconciliation, the BHS student newspaper, formerly known as the Sagamore, has begun the process of changing the newspaper's name. Knowing this, recognizing that the student committee does not feel it is appropriate, and in consultation with the Indigenous groups, an Indigenous name will not be forwarded as a finalist for our school. Thus, Sagamore, James, Massasoit, and the Quabbin Reservoir will not be in consideration for moving forward.
Great, thank you. And that goes back to your point, Mariah. What did those 3 asterisks mean? Narrowing the field. So based on kind of listing out this picture here that takes up most of the space, I don't want to get lost in the details. This is just kind of a working document that we really relied on to capture a lot of our thinking. We had many morning conversations over donuts. We've had many Zoom conversations where we're really talking about the candidates and doing some kind of initial research to figure out, are they meeting kind of that person, place, event? Yes, okay, yes, no. Connection to the greater Boston, Brookline area? Yes, no. Helper? Yes, no. What does it mean to be a helper? And really sussing out those required for us conditions for a candidate, and then really talking about the nice to have. And some of the things we've really talked about is, what does it mean to help? What does it mean to have a connection to education? And Frederick Law Olmsted's a really interesting kind of example that we've used over and over again. He was very committed to apprenticeships, to educating other landscape architects coming up. And we study him so thoroughly in our curriculum, in our classes, and visit his spaces that he built for us. And so for us, it's like, yeah, did he teach in an elementary school? No, but he was a great educator. So those are the kinds of things we've really been kind of parsing out. And so when narrowing the field, seven candidates really rose to the top. Our work is still ongoing, but we did feel strongly that now's an opportunity to really talk about 7 of the candidates that have really risen to the top for us and name them out loud. The candidates are Ruth Batson, Frederick Law Olmsted, the artist John Wilson, Roland Hayes, Eunice Kennedy Shriver. The settlement, again, the settlement is the original name of the place where we currently reside, the non-Indigenous name. And then Ellen and William Kraft, who, as an aside, have really come into some vogue lately because a new book is out on their life, which is getting a lot of great press. So that's kind of what our field is looking like right now as we narrow the candidates field. So now we have Miriam here to talk about timeline for us.
Hello, everybody. Just because you don't get enough of me, you wanted some more, I know. Miriam Ashkenazi, Select Board, but I'm actually here in my capacity as a Heath parent. I'm going into my 11th plus year as a Heath parent. And final year as a Heath parent, as far as I know, and have been a part of this process right from the very get-go, and I'm really honored to see it play out. And the first thing I want to note is that this is a proposed timeline with items there are still things that we're working out. We want to learn as much as we can about the Florida Rough and Ridley process. And I have to really throw a shout out to Anne Greenwald and Deborah Brown, who've been very helpful keeping us informed on what that process was like. But right now, what we're doing is more educational work with students, researching the finalists, and really kind of upping the messaging in the school community and throughout town. And then we hope in April and May to have some sort of voting process, and that says to be determined because it is to be determined what that will look like, to bring us down to some finalists. Whether, we know Florida Rough and Ridley, there was opportunities for the town to give input, for the school to give input. And then my understanding is it was the school committee that made the final decision. We do know we have to go in front of the townwide naming committee. So all of that will happen in the spring. And then we hope to have a name and really use the summer to announce the name and educate people, while a few of us on the warrant article committee write up and prepare a warrant article. Slightly different from Florida Rough and Ridley, where they transitioned from the original school name to the Coolidge Corner School, and then a second warrant article to rename the school. We are going to do a write and replace warrant article, which will be a single warrant article to remove and replace the name. Our goal is to submit that in fall 2023 town meeting and continue with the education and outreach.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Opportunities to learn. I'm going to hand it over to Carla Weathers, Heath parent.
Gotta unmute myself here. Okay, in the following slides, you will see 4 slides highlighting some of the school finalists. Ms. Redbaum, the grade 1 teacher, has made a resource highlighting 50 plus Black Americans for Black History Month in a presentation we are using school-wide called Black History Month Heroes. All February, we are celebrating Black History Month throughout the school, and these slides are just one way to highlight what makes some of our candidates remarkable. Once finalists are announced, each will get highlighted and celebrated as a part of the overall educational process. For example, during Women History Month and Developmental Disability Awareness Month, we will have more chances to feature our exceptional nominees.
Awesome. Thank you. So like Carla said, Emily Redburn, our first grade teacher, just put a slew of things together, and we decided this would be a great opportunity to introduce 4 of our most likely finalists to the school community, to our kids. And so here, each slide for all the Black History Month heroes look like these. And then this one in Roland Hayes, like if you click here, the kids get to see or hear some of the music that Roland Hayes is playing and singing himself. So, we're trying to really provide information for kids that's really appealing and interactive, but also really straightforward because we have a lot to learn. This is the slide for Ellen and William Kraft. I want to thank Mike Chan, who really put this all kind of in that Brookline friendly format that all of our presentations together. But again, Ellen and William Kraft, there's a brand new book out about them. So a lot of information is forthcoming, which is an exciting time to be talking about this family. Ruth Batson, foundational in launching the METCO program. And without METCO, right, we really lose a huge chunk of our identity. It's so important to us. And so having a candidate that represents METCO is really, really exciting. And Ruth Batson was a finalist for the Florida Rough and Ridley School. So that feels like a nice connection to that process. And then the artist, John Wilson, and our young scholars, our African-American Latino young scholars have spent a lot of time working with John Wilson's family, his widow, thinking about his art and looking at his art. And this was a nominee that they put forward. Very powerful candidate, we feel. So when it comes time for Women's History Month, we'll have slides for Eunice Kennedy Shriver. We'll have slides for all of our candidates eventually, as we really deepen that educational piece for kids. And finally, just want to name our volunteers, the adult committee, the student committee. Tonight we've had Marin, grade 4, had Elisa here, grade 5, Bruno representing grade 5 as well, Madison in grade 6, Francesca in grade 6 as well, Sophie representing grade 8, and then Asha from grade 10, and Rowan from grade 10, which is so fantastic to have them return. That shows the commitment our alumni have. Again, a lot of the nominees were, nominated by alumni or seconded by alumni as well. They're very invested in this. Thanks to Dr. Barbara Brown with in Brookline, the team at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School, of course, Dr. Guillory, who's always such a great guide and an ear for me, and then just the entire school and the faculty. And then now, thanks to the school committee, I feel like we've really done our best to loop you in, and we're excited to have you in our process and really be guides for us as well. Finally, resources. The website is chock full, and we hope you'll check it out. And then any questions, because we'll try to have answers.
All right, so who has some questions and or comments?
Nancy.
I just wanted, as always, I just wanted to say this is such great work. One of the things that I'm really, really focusing on is how to come together as a community. And what a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful reason for it, to bring in the entire community of Brookline to celebrate, the possibility of what a school could be named, and have the legacy of that, to bring in the kids, the whole community. This is fantastic. Thank you so much to all of you. This is a lot of work, because it's a lot of research. So I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort. And you guys all did a wonderful job. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that the things that the adults grappled over for months, the students saw so clearly and were able to make decisions that were just like kind of cut through the nonsense and really got to the meat of the work. I was, I shouldn't be surprised, but I really was, and very humbled. I think it's been a very humbling experience for me working with these students.
So I hope you guys grow up and run for school committee.
More pizzazz.
Exactly.
Stephen?
Pizzazz is everything to a great slideshow.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Nancy said. Thank you for such a smart and thoughtful presentation. I think this was really a model for how to set up a process for doing something that's really important, but also really sensitive, and doing it really carefully and thoughtfully. I just wanted to ask some of the students who participated in this process, if you wouldn't mind sharing some reflections on how it's been for you to go through this process, and what kind of voices you've been hearing as you've been going through it. Have they been supportive? Have they been difficult? Have they been mixed? Have they been all of the same? I'm just kind of curious what it's been like going through this.
My experience, like my family was like very excited for me to get an opportunity, especially with like how much I just like helping out. I guess that apart from that, not many people knew I was in student committee, so there was not really a reaction of there were not many reactions that I can go based on.
Thanks, Sophia. Anybody else? Yeah, Marin.
When I was doing it, a bunch of my friends were like, I don't really want to do it, but can you? Because whenever my friends need someone to like talk to, like a new teacher or a new student, they just ask me to introduce them.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to do it, and I looked into it, and I just thought, this is cool. So I like looked into it, and I really started liking it. And so I tried joining, and then I just got hooked.
Madison, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
For me, a lot of my friends are like asking, "Oh, so what's the school name gonna be? Did you guys pick a name yet?" Like they're all asking me for what the name was, and I told them I couldn't tell them, and they got mad at me.
Elisa?
I find it very exciting because when I first saw this, I mean, well, I actually didn't first see it. My mom did, and she was like, "Oh, there's this email that came out on like the recap of the week or something, and it had that in it." So I just kind of like was like, "Oh, can I join?" So, and she said yes. So I just filled out the whole form, and then I was honestly super surprised and excited when I heard that I actually was gonna be in it.
Bruno?
My experience was that so a lot of people when anyone like brought up the fact that the name was going to be changed, everyone was like, "No, it's such a waste of time. No, it's we don't need it. No, because then what are we going to do? Change the name of the street as well?" And in fourth grade, there was an entire like debate on whether we should change the name or not. It wasn't like going into town hall or anything. It was just like an in-class debate. And so ever since that moment, I wanted to prove to my friends or anyone who was against changing the name that they were wrong. And so first opportunity I got to join the renaming committee, like I didn't even have to think about it. I joined, and because I really wanted to stick it in my friend's face that they were wrong and I was right.
That's great.
Everybody's motivated
Oh,
by
I like
something.
you.
Francesca?
For me, last year, I really didn't know what, like when I first heard about this, I didn't really know what to think of it. And it was just happening, and it was just something that was there, but I didn't really put much thought to it. But this year, it was actually my ELA teacher. She said, "Well, I think that this would be like a really great opportunity for you." Because I'm on student council and she knows how much I enjoy doing that. And she thought, well, this could be like a really interesting experience for you. So at first, like I opened up the application and I thought, well, and I just like kind of let it sit there. And then when I finally filled it out, I like Elisa, I was really like surprised that I got in. And like since then it's been a really interesting experience.
Well,
I'd love it if Asha
I
would
just want to
chip in
say
real quick.
that I think it's really important work, and I think the people we name our schools after are the people we choose to honor as a community, and that sets the culture for our community for what we think is important. So I think you guys are doing really important work, and I thank you for taking it so seriously.
And adding on a little to what Stephen just said, in addition to the reflecting on the identity and sort of the culture of the school community and selecting a name, you also learn a lot about history and research and writing and communication, community organizing through this process. So it's really a multifaceted effort, and it's great hearing from all of you about your experiences. Nancy?
I just wanted to add that I think that I just keep going. I want to encourage all of you. This is wonderful. Run for student council. Run for, just keep going. You're doing terrific, and I'm really, really proud of all of you. So I'm going to see all you guys doing some awesome things in the years to come. I know it.
Hi. Asha, I think you wanted to speak. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to add on. I think I heard Asa say something. I'm now BHS, but it's really exciting to be able to still be working with the school because I was on student council when I was at Heath. And I think it's really important as a community to work on renaming it. So I just want to say that.
Yeah, great.
Carla?
Just to echo what everyone is saying, when this first came out, I was, first excited that this project was happening, but I was most excited just the idea of it for these lucky young people, that if you can accomplish this type of change and watch how it's assembled and discussed and debated and researched in a group. And like he said, the debate in the class is excellent. Like I can only imagine what your life is going to be like just knowing change is possible. And I'm just excited about this in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much to everyone who presented. This was very impressive. And as you could see, there's a lot of interest in learning about what our students in particular are getting out of this process. It's very important work. So thank you again. Probably approaching some of your bedtimes for the students who are here, but if you want to stay on for our next agenda item, you're more than welcome to do so. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you very much.
And Mariah, sorry, I saw your hand going up when I began to issue my closing remarks on this agenda item. So if you want to go ahead.
Thanks. I just had a question. Just that there was no action we need to take tonight, right? This was just informational. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
All right, so we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is a report on the Public Schools of Brookline staffing profile for the 2022-23 school year. So Ms. Fluger.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I've been at the meeting this whole time and now my internet has become unstable, so I got kicked out of my computer. I am logging back in right now and joining you from my cell phone. So I'm not sure if someone else can share the screen for me, the slides. If not, it's just going to take a few moments to get back in.
Do you want me to pull them up or is someone else doing it? Oh, Robin is perfect.
Thank you so much, Robin.
In the meantime, Hedy Lamar, is there a Boston connection there?
I thought she was controversial too.
I guess I'll just look that up myself.
Can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one, I just want to say that it's definitely exciting to see all the Heath students, and it just makes me proud to be able to talk about some of the great work that our PSB HR team has been doing in order to get great educators in front of our students. And so just to see them and their excitement on the project they're working on is really great. So tonight I'll be doing the second half of the staffing profile presentation that was originally done by my counterpart, Janae, on December 15th. Next slide, please. We'll go through the agenda just to remind you of that presentation. So tonight I'll be talking about the staffing objectives for this school year, 22-23. I'll be going over some hiring data, focusing on the things that I've been focusing on to build a strong PSB HR foundation, including the systems and processes that have been implemented. But I'll be also giving a breakdown of the reported data, both staff and student, and then talking a little bit about the implementation of our electronic onboarding process. You'll notice that the second and third bullet were presented on the 15th of December. And then once I'm done giving that information, we'll leave it open for a few questions if there are any. So first off, I just wanted to give a breakdown as of December of 2022, the amount of hires that we processed in the on the HR team. We processed a total of 232 BEU hires. That included both full-time and part-time new hires and transfers within the district, whether they were promotions or our staff looking to be located at different school buildings. The breakdown of that was 116 teachers, 8 Unit B administrators, and 108 paraprofessionals. I also wanted to give you a breakdown of some of our other union hires that we did, which were 8 non-aligned staff as of December of 2022, 43 AFSCME staff, which included 7 custodians, 27 food service workers, and 9 BISA members, which is our secretary unit. Next slide. This is an image that you may all recognize from last year. I chose to approach it and give you some of the updates of the work that has been done towards building the foundation, implementing. So step one was switching over from a paperless and switching to a paperless environment and putting a lot of our processes online. One of the big things that included was implementing PowerSchool's records module, which was essentially taking our onboarding process of new hires and transfers from emails and paper into a completely online system where they can follow an online checklist. This also included bringing in-person welcome session onboarding meetings for all new hires, meaning that every person that we hire into the public schools of Brookline, a staff member from the PSB HR team meets with them and to go through all of their new hire paperwork to give them that personable touch. Another thing that's really important that we've discussed previously is just having data that's readily accessible so that we can stay audit ready. Some of the things that we've been committed to is building the bridges between our counterparts. And what that looks like is for the PSB HR team, we have our counterpart in school payroll, but we also have our town counterparts in town payroll and town HR. And so one of the things that the directors of those teams and myself have been committed to is establishing a team meeting between those 4 teams to make sure that we're understanding how our work intersects and how we can operate more efficiently to get things processed. The foundation is completely built on the employee experience and just overall making that better. We want to make sure that we're processing employee documentation online with task management online checklists that I briefly spoke about before, and that we're also looking to get to a point where we're able to communicate updates and reminders in real time using the records module, whether that be the salary verification letters that we send out or various things that we already have built into our different CBAs that we have to communicate out from the PSB HR team to our PSB community. The next part of it would be is enjoying our HR operations. And so what this looks like and some of the work that has been done is working through ways to make our processes more efficient, meaning workflows, cross-training, and also as a part of staying audit ready with our team counterparts is understanding how our system units impacts our departments and our works. What we're learning the last year and a half as we're building the bridges between these 4 departments is that we all operate the system in different ways and that it can impact us. So we want to make sure that we all fully understand that so that we can work better as a team. And then lastly, the digital forms, basically cleaning up templates. Some of those things included our transaction form, building an online leave of absence and accommodation request process, actually implementing an FTE change request to clean up some of that information and get it in one centralized location, and also bringing our letter of suitability request online so that we can track those and make sure that we're getting all those letters out in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So Janae is here tonight. You'll notice these slides are similar to some of the data slides that Janae presented on December 15th. And after meeting with her, after the meeting, these next couple of slides, we will tag team to, and the purpose of them are, some of you had questions in wanting to compare data from 3 previous school years. So we've added in not only the data that we're reporting to DESE as of October 3rd, just to remind you, that last column, it does not include the data in its entirety for all the years, does not include custodial staff, per diem substitutes, or coaches, but it does include LTS nurses, which is long-term subs that we hire as nurses. The last column of our SY 22-23 data that was reported October 3rd is data that has not been published by DESE, but we just wanted to make it clear that once it's published, you'll be able to find it there, and that these total numbers are head count numbers for that. So this was added to the presentation. Janae, I don't know if you want to jump in here to make some of the comparisons that you made before, now having the 3 previous school years available for our school committee to see.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ty. I think, and we can deal with this too if there are questions at the end, but we did feel it was really important. So really thankful to Ty and our data team for making sure that we could have that comparison for you all. So we can hang out here for a minute so you can take a look just at some of the numbers, the head count numbers, for example, of our different demographic BIPOC groups over the course of these 4 years. And also obviously the gender totals.
Thank you. And then just pointing out that the difference in one of the things that our data team right now is working with DESE on the 1406 total headcount number that you see there. They're working right now with DESE to update that data because it actually included 60 of our previous employees that transitioned out of the district, which is why it looks like it's a little bit higher than the average that you see across the 3 previous years, just in case that question were to come up. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question about that, Ty, just to go back a step? Sorry. It's my recollection that the number of staff went up from last year to this year by about 6. But the thing you just said implied that the staff would have gone up by 45.
So I'm not quite sure if you're thinking about it in terms of FTE. This is
because this
actual
is head count. Okay,
This is head count, and so
I see. Thank you.
it
You
just
said that, and I didn't process before.
No,
okay.
it's okay. I think it's important to break that down a little bit for those who may have a similar question. So the difference is like when we talk about headcount, that it can include any breakdown of our FTEs. So if we've broken down an FTE into partial, where we have a 0.2 employee, a 0.4 to better staff the needs of the school and the scheduling, that's where that number is able to grow. It doesn't necessarily mean we've created more positions.
But the previous years are FTE. Because you didn't, there's no human who's 0.5, like last year says 1299.5.
There is, my understanding is that on the DESE website, it does say that that is FTE.
Okay, but this year is headcount.
Yes, this data was directly given by our data team, and they ensured me that this is headcount.
Okay.
You're welcome. Next slide. Let's see here. So I'm moving this around. One of the other things that came from our 1215 presentation were questions around how does our staffing break down this school year in terms of our BEU staff members by unit. There are 3 units. There's our unit A, which is our teachers. There's unit B, which are administrators, and there's our paraprofessional unit. And this slide here shows you how the hiring of our demographics of our BEU staff as of January 3rd. So I'll give it a little time for you to be able to see that.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So the head count, the head count was 1,400 for 2023. But
minus give or take 60, because our data team just realized that in reporting that data, there were staff members that transitioned from the district were not removed. So they're working with DESE as we speak to get that updated before it actually gets published.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide. We also had a question about how does our BEU staff break down by building type. Initially, the question was K-8 and versus our high school. I went ahead and added in our BEAT program so that we can see the total BEU staff of the 1,263 active staff that we have right now, so that you can see how the demographics break down in each group of schools that we have.
Hi. Ty, on the previous slide, do you have trend information? It doesn't have to be now, but do you have like the past 3 years? of racial demographics by
I don't have that readily available. This is something that I put together based on the questions that you all asked in particular for this school year. That's not something that I have right now, but I can look into it. It would just be something that I would have to build similar to how I built this.
Okay, if it's possible, I would love to see the previous slide over a 3-year period.
I will look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ty.
You're welcome. Next slide, Robin, please. And though the question wasn't asked, I went ahead and added to the student enrollment data for our SIMs that's reported to DESE, notating also that the student data that was reported as of October 3rd is not published as of yet, but these are the numbers that were reported to DESE by our data team. And I went ahead and added in the previous 3 years just to give you a similar comparison to look back at for that. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to look at that as well. And then Janae and I will be able to answer any questions you have regarding either the staffing data that I presented and or these data slides.
Thanks, Ty. And we had said in that presentation, just as we did last year, that the total sort of numbers for students who identify as students of color, sort of even with students who identify as white, right around the 50% range, and that comparison with staff being quite different.
And I believe the next slide just says questions. So I know a few asked questions during the presentation, but we're definitely here to answer any questions you may have. I think Suzanne's hand may be up. I'm not quite sure. I'm seeing that right.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Janae, for this. It just seems so, I know we've been talking about this for certainly a number of years, and I know we've made some real efforts to increase some of those numbers of non-white, certainly staff, but it looks like it's pretty flat in the last 4 or 5 years. Are any reflections on that or comments?
Yes, and so sort of similar to some of the things you might recall when I was speaking about this on the 15th, what we're finding is that, and this is true, I mean, DESE talks about this, schools of ed talk about this, but we definitely have educators leaving the profession. There aren't as many folks wanting to go into teaching. I feel like the pandemic certainly contributed to some of that, but we were seeing some of those trends even before the pandemic, and it becomes increasingly hard to sort of stay in the profession. So we're having literally this week conversations with BU and other colleges and universities to look at what their numbers are in their schools of ed and the partnering that they're trying to do with districts to sort of increase interest and support individuals who are trying to go into education. So just as many, we had an event last night as an example, a recruiting event last night, and we're definitely finding that the data is indicating that it's becoming harder and harder, not just for educators of color, but just adults in general to go into the teaching profession. So it's getting harder and harder. And that flat line makes a lot of sense according to the numbers that we're seeing. So.
Nancy?
Hi, Janae. I think you just, thank you for that. Hi, it's good to see you. I think you just answered my question, but I was just going to ask, are we, and I'm sorry if you had this number and I missed it, how do we compare to, across the state?
Are you asking specifically of staff of color?
Yes, I guess. Yeah.
We're pretty, in some cases we're doing a little bit better, but that number looks different year to year. But in a number of the conferences that we've gone to, I think I mentioned last time, the MECO Directors Association conference, there's a woman, Dr. Sarone Daly, who did a whole breakdown across not only sort of urban areas in the state, but suburban areas in the state. And I know Mariah was talking about that point person, but like the 0.2 or the 1.3, but we are fairly competitive in terms of many districts having increased over the years by 1.2% or 2%. And in some cases, we looked a lot better. I have that graphic, and I'm certainly happy to share it with you. This was up for Metco districts that her data was looking at, but we're competing with everyone else for the same small number of folks. That's been true for a while.
So is it just, I mean, as a conclusion or a supposition that the majority of people who go to become educators are white? Is that?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that per se, and I certainly don't have those numbers sort of across the country. I do think that in many cases you may have folks of color going into different fields, and we're certainly not just talking about Black and brown, but I think that what we're seeing, at least in Massachusetts schools, so which is one of the reasons why we've been spending some time reaching out to historically Black universities and colleges, because the demographic there is that population. But we're definitely finding that the colleges are saying in their incoming master's degree programs, they have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And then, there's any number of districts that are vying for those people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks again. This is great.
Mariah?
Thanks. I was wondering if you track other measures of diversity beyond race and ethnicity. And it would be helpful to get those sorts of reports as well. I know one of the things that we've talked about is, for example, increasing the fraction of male teachers to role model that. And of course, there's many other ways we can think about that. That's just one example. So could you comment on
Sure,
tracking of that?
And if we pull up the first slide, actually it's slide number 5, Robin, we do track uneven gender, and that is on that slide.
Absolutely.
If you want to take a look at it again.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that in the first one.
Yeah, and Mariah, I can't speak to tracking that we're doing on our side. All I can tell you is that the conversations that we have with university schools of ed are always around how can we get male teachers in our elementary schools? How can we get women of color in our STEM courses? So some of those conversations we have every time. I don't have the numbers though to say, BU has this many men versus UMass, Boston has this many men, et cetera. But certainly the gender diversity is something that we've been talking a lot about.
And I'd love to think about how we could, I don't know if this is a state requirement for reporting, but how we think about neurodiversity or disability representation among our teaching population. So
absolutely. We were fortunate enough last night to have an excellent person that we recruited just last year who identifies in a few of those categories, address our group of prospective candidates. So we're definitely thinking about that as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ellen?
Yeah, I'm wondering, in the past, we've done a lot of student teachers and programs with Simmons and BU and BC, I think. Are we still doing that? And are we trying to ask them for interns who are people of color?
So we have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ty, did you?
Oh, no, that's fine. I was gonna just say, yes, we still do have those programs. They actually are ran by our OTL team directly. And then you can go ahead and Jenny.
So you might remember in the past, Helen, we had a program called Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers, that a couple of our amazing educators in PSB spent some time working with. So we were just able to have a meeting with Dr. Perkins, who's sort of the person who runs that program. And our partnership in Brookline through Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education is trying to sort of lend money to help districts that might be wanting to bring that program back. And so we've been engaged in that conversation with today's students, tomorrow's teachers, and it's quite a lift financially. It's nice to know that MPDE is willing to come alongside and, you know, subsidize a bit of that, but it's certainly a conversation that we're having. So we're exploring things like that.
Yeah, that program was a good program. I don't know if we got any teachers out of it.
We got one or two who moved out of the state. There's one young man who relocated to Hawaii. Nothing we could do about it, but yes, you know, the educators in PSB fondly remember that program, and it's they're certainly up and running again. So.
But can we request from those universities that they send us students who are of color when they come to do student teaching?
We have a way of, at least in the past, and Ty, I don't know what your department's been doing around this, but certainly we've worked with the coordinators, let's say at the high school, to find language to suggest that that's something that we're interested in. And I come back to the same point that we're competing with a number of districts, and we're talking about a finite number of individuals.
Thank you. And thank you guys for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation and providing this level of detailed data to us. It's very helpful. Mariah?
Thanks. I actually have one question on the earlier part of the presentation for you, Ty. As part of your systems modernization, are you digitizing, or I don't know what the right word is, some sort of database for adding people's certifications and credentials in as well?
Yes, so that is a project that I started last year. The first phase of it was pulling all the licensure from DESE. And so the second phase of it is actually like breaking that down, making sure that we have everyone's location so that we can communicate it out correctly and how I want that to be communicated so that folks know where they are in their licensure, whether they've taught on it 5 years and they need to reach out to DESE, or if their initial is expired and they need to go apply for their professional. So that is something that's definitely on my radar, and building that database so that we can make sure that we're tracking that in a more efficient way.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
All right, so thank you again, Ty and Janae, for that presentation. And we'll now move into our next agenda item, which is also a tie. Possible vote to approve memorandum of agreement with AFSCME School Food Service Workers.
Thank you. So we have 2 MOAs for our AFSCME Food Service Workers that would like you to vote on today. One of them entails a BHS chef position. Essentially, during negotiations last year with our food service team, both parties agreed as a part of the negotiations to have a BHSF position opened up. Unfortunately, when the final version was sent to sign it, it was sorry, my cat just ran across my toe. Sorry about that. The draft that was signed was actually a first draft and not the final draft. So in good faith efforts to keep our good relationship with our AFSCME counterparts, we agreed to go ahead and draft up an MOA so we can add that language into the current CBA that you guys have already voted on. So I don't know if you want to do one at a time. I can pause there.
We should do one at a time, yes. Any questions regarding this MOA agreement for the food service workers? Specifically, high school chef. So you move it, Helen. Suzanne, is that a second or you had a question?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
I just wanted this will be integrated into the bargaining agreement and not a sidebar agreement, or is
that is correct. So some of the work that I've been doing this year in tandem with our VDH attorneys is working with MTA and the BEU to integrate our contracts, and that also includes AFSCME as well. And so what we're doing is integrating the most recent MOAs into our previously approved contracts so that we can actually have one document. So it will not stand alone as a side note. It will be integrated in the language that's in the MOA will be integrated into the final draft.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so Helen moved the question. Do we have a second?
Yes, I
Thank
second.
you. Thank you, Stephen. All right, your vote, Helen?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, so that brings us to our next vote. Possible vote to approve memorandum of agreement with AFSCME school food service workers for work during vacations. So Ty, if you want to briefly take us through that one again.
Yes, so thank you. This particular MOA, we went to the bargaining table with our AFSCME counterparts to discuss the potential work that is being done during February break, April break, and December breaks. It's not work that is done all the time, but there's situations where kitchens may need to be deep cleansed or inventory that needs to be taken care of during times where they're not busy. And because our food service workers have a blended pay schedule, they're technically not paid. They're paid because their pay is blended, but that is actually, those breaks are days that don't count towards their contractual days that they have to work for the school year. So we came to an agreement that if they are going to be called into work, that we would pay them at time and a half in order to incentivize them to come in. And it's at the sole discretion of our director of food service to assign that work, to assess the skill sets and of the work that's needed to make sure that it's done efficiently. And it is not something that will be done all the time, but it's definitely work that may be needed during the breaks.
All right, thank you for that explanation.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions, Andy?
Yeah, same question as about the other MOA. Is this to be integrated into the contract or is it standalone?
It will be integrated in as well.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, would someone like to move the question? Thank you, Andy. Is there a second? Thank you, Stephen. Helen, your vote?
Yes, sorry.
Andy?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Nancy?
Oh, yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that leads us to our third and final vote of the night, which is a possible vote to extend the school bus contracts. Who would like to introduce that?
We talked about it at finance yesterday. Do you want me to take it since we did the review yesterday?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so the bus contracts are coming up and they have a multi-year option to extend. Matt presented them to us for a vote, provided a memo a week or so ago, recommending that the school committee vote to extend the leases. We consulted with Dave Giannakakis, who's the chief procurement officer for the town as well, who concurred with Matt's recommendation. The finance committee took a unanimous vote yesterday, 3-0 to endorse, to recommend to the full school committee favorable action on endorsing on extending the contracts.
Any questions? Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, well, if we were to provide bus service to South Brookline, would that have an impact on these contracts?
Contracts have to do with the rates.
Right. I mean, would we get a better rate if we had more, or? I mean,
No.
should there be some provision that says we may need to revisit this if we were to change what we need?
The contract extension, I don't think, the whole point is we're not revisiting it. And it was considered to be favorable by the staff in that format.
Well, I just meant if we were to change our circumstances, would that change, what we would get from them? As if we guaranteed more, I'm just wondering what impact that would have.
I think if I could help you, Mariah,
Yeah.
apparently our contract is quite a good contract, considering the increase in costs for diesel and labor. And so we need to keep this contract that we have now, because I think if we were to reopen it, we would not be able to access the numbers that we have.
I think more broadly, from going off of Suzanne's question, is there the capacity to expand our current?
I
bus
think there
service
is,
under this
but I
contract?
can't say that 100%. I'm pretty sure that there must be a clause in there that allows us, if we need an extra bus, that, they will provide it.
Andy?
Because well, Matt would know better. I can't tell you that for sure.
It's a related question is if we were to institute a new bus service for relocating Pierce kids to Newbury, would we just be negotiating with a new vendor, or could we bring that under this contract as well? I guess it's very similar to what Suzanne asked.
Yeah, it's a similar
but here we'd be
question.
instituting a completely new service, not just expanding an
Unfortunately,
existing one.
Matt's not with us tonight. I don't think he knew this was going to be coming up, so, and I can't answer it.
I'm pulling up the contract now to see if I can clarify some of these questions.
Wow,
Hang on one
to
minute.
read through that whole contract?
It's not that long.
And I'm going to give Matt a quick call to see if we can get clarity on those two as well.
So why don't we move on to something else and come back to it once we know the answers?
Right, so why don't we go to subcommittee and liaison reports, and we'll come back to this. So Helen, Capital.
So unfortunately, I think I'm going to need to postpone the Capitol meeting for next week on Tuesday. It may just be postponed till April, but that's TBD. Also, I wanted to inform everybody that Tony Quigley, who has been our project manager on many school projects, is going to be retiring. Very sadly, I'm sorry to say this. And so just wanted to let people know that probably this Tuesday will be his last commission meeting. And it'll be a big loss, especially since the building department has not hired anybody to replace Ray Masick, who was also in a similar position to him. So I'm not sure what's happening there right now.
All right, Suzanne, curriculum.
No, we're not meeting. I'm meeting with Grace next week, and then the curriculum meets the end of February.
Okay. Valerie, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Meeting with Janae next week, and then we'll meet in March. But I did want to talk about Driscoll on Tuesday. Excuse me, the building leaders and I had a conversation through the PTO with caregivers and community members about not just an update on the building, but also on starting conversations on traditions to bring over from Old Driscoll and new traditions to start. So there's really a lot of great collaboration happening with the site council and the PTO and families and building leaders. So that project is moving ahead.
Mariah, finance.
Things finance met yesterday, and we didn't get all the way through our agenda. It was an overly ambitious agenda. We spent a lot of time discussing proposed user fees for next year and going through that. We don't have a plan to vote those until our next meeting. And we also discussed building rental fees and looked at some changes in the structure to those. In addition, we had a discussion, a more detailed discussion of the sort of really getting into the weeds on some of the override requests that we previewed at a high level, or that we discussed at a high level today. We got a really great presentation from Margaret on the transition to and the vision for transitioning to a full day BEEP program and the different costs and impacts of that. And then we also had a great presentation from Kyle and Anthony at the high school, as I alluded to earlier. That's as far as we got in our agenda. So we'll be meeting next on March 1st, and we'll be covering non-personnel that was supposed to happen yesterday. And I think hopefully at least some of the personnel discussion as well.
All right, thank you. Policy is next going to be meeting this Monday, the 13th at 5 o'clock. It's essentially going to be a continuation on the same agenda items we had at our January meeting. So we are going to be reviewing a draft revision of the physical education and athletics policy. We will also be looking at a revision to the substance use and prevention policy, along with a look at the student code of conduct in the context of substance use. There will also be an update and discussion on the sustainability task force. Any additional liaison updates?
I have Matt on the line if we want to take him.
All right, great. So Matt, we'll go to you. We have some questions about the bus contract.
You hear Matt?
I'm here.
All right, Suzanne, do you want to ask your question to Matt?
Hey, Eddie.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Matt. Suzanne. I'm wondering if there's provisions in this new contract that we're voting on, if we were to change our services to South Brookline. You know, we might add additional buses, or there might be different demands. I'm just wondering how that would fit in. And then Andy has kind of a similar question. If Andy wants to ask his.
Go ahead, Andy.
Sure. Mine was the same question, but with respect to having a new bus service for taking Pierce kids to Newberry during the rebuilding, whether that would come under the current contract or whether we'd just be negotiating with other vendors to set that up.
No, we would first offer it to our existing vendor, Eastern Bus, because they provide that service. If they were not able to do it, then I'd probably, the next call would be to Local Motion, who provides the Metco service. Our contract and the general, rule of law for procurement is that you can go up or down 25% when you're procuring services due to enrollment or change in business. 25% of 6, is less than 2 buses, but we could ask for the 2 or the 3 or whatever the committee needed. And in regards to the Newberry, we'd be giving them enough time and notice after the vote for them to be able to procure additional buses and find drivers. So I don't think it would be either an equipment restraint or a driver restraint for them to make it happen for us.
But it would be at the same price.
Yeah.
What would be this price, Matt?
The price for an additional bus is right on there. It's a per diem per bus.
Okay.
So even though this would be an entirely new bus service, the one to Newberry, like if they undertook to do it for us, it would be at this price.
It would, because we can go up or down. If our needs change within 25% of what we bid out, which was we were looking for 6 buses, they agreed when they bid it to honor the price.
I see, but Newberry might be more than 25% of the current service.
Right. I guess I have faith that, and I could get that answer. I just haven't asked them yet. Although I did give them the heads up that we might be needing busing again should a Pierce project pass.
Right, because if we're talking about 6 buses and any change greater than 25%, we would have to go out for procurement again. We're going to need more than one bus.
We can ask them if they'd honor the price.
Yeah.
That would probably be the first thing, and discuss that with Dave Giannakakis, because some of my colleagues that are going out to bid have been seeing double-digit price increases for new contracts.
Andy, just one comment, which is that the bus category is all in-town transportation. Maybe you said that, but I just want to make sure everyone realized that the one that we're applying, it's not like it's route specific. It's just the number of buses.
Okay, yeah, but this exceeding, we would certainly exceed the 25% if we had a bus service to Newbury. So would we just have to renegotiate?
Because if we have 6 buses, if we go to 8, that's more than 25% right off the bat there, and that's not including a potential South Brookline bus as well.
With the South Brookline bus, I think it's important to keep in mind that we have 2 buses already that are going there. So we would be looking at how much of that cost we would be pulling back fully on the general fund budget in that regard. So assessing truly what that fee is against what our new costs are as such. So and Matt, I just want to confirm that right now we have 2 buses that are going down there.
Yeah, we have 4 elementary buses and 2 high school buses, and that's the contract. We just budget for them a little differently, but on our end, but we pay them the same per diem rate for any one of those 6 buses. If we give them time, I think they'll honor it. Because they probably don't want to have to compete. But either way, we'll ask the question and see what the procurement office says and see what the vendor says. And if we have to go back to bid, we will.
But are we
I don't
obligated
think
to
we
put it
should
out for bid if
discuss
it's more than
this.
25%?
Since this is a negotiation, I don't think we should discuss it anymore now, but I think we should vote this contract extension and then discuss the rest in executive session when we have it posted.
I agree. I would just point out that even if we have to do a separate contract or renegotiation, we've been told by staff that this is a favorable contract and we should sign it. We should vote this contract and deal with anything else later. So I would move favorable action on the extension of the bus contracts.
And I second it.
All right, Helen, your vote?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, thank you, Matt, for joining us. Getting back to subcommittee liaison reports, we were at the point of whether there are any additional liaison updates. Seeing none. Any new business?
Can I actually just make one quick comment that, and I mentioned this at finance yesterday, that in my role as liaison to the extended days, I did notify them of the user fee discussion, the building rental fee discussion that we were having yesterday.
All right. Anyone else?
I have new business.
Go ahead.
I think this is Robin's last meeting. And I think I, for one, would like to thank her. It is your last meeting, Robin, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I'm sorry to hear this, but I, for one, would like to thank you for all your years of hard work for all of us. You've been exceptional. I'm not sure how we're going to replace you. And I wish you well in retirement. I'm sorry you decided to do it now. And thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mariah?
Yeah, Robin, I feel like we have met, it feels like, I think just under, more or less got to know each other well over the past 3 years. And in COVID, it's definitely been a lot more virtual than in person, but I've just been so struck by just how wonderful you are and how competent you are and how much you've done for us and just been unflappable and such a resource, especially for a volunteer committee such as this, which is so intense. Having you as the sort of the ballast by which this whole committee knows what to do and when to do and how to do it is just spectacular. So I can't thank you enough. You've really made my time on the committee so much easier than it could have been and been such a great presence. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Suzanne?
Yeah, Robert, I'm gonna miss you so much. I don't know if the public knows, but without you, I don't think we'd run it smoothly as we do, and probably not as legally as we do. But you know, I was chair for 2 years and you really made it work for me. And I just really want to personally thank you so much for both your friendship and for your wisdom and competence. So I wish you all the best. I'm looking forward to pictures of all your travels. And I hope we see you around just for fun and coffee.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Nancy?
I echo every single thing that everybody said, and I've only known you a short time, but I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, Robin, I don't know what we're going to do. Thank you for being so patient with me and always just, you know, keeping us organized. I don't know how you do it. It's not herding cats is not even we need I don't even know, just to say thank you. Thank you for everything, for all the time that you've put in. And I honestly, I don't know what we're going to do, but I wish you so well in everything that you do and everywhere that you go. Get some rest, have some fun, have a big bottle of wine, and have a marvelous time. You absolutely deserve it. Do you have any food allergies?
I do not.
Oh, okay, good. Just checking. Okay. Robin, thank you. Thank you so much. I wish you so well.
I also want to thank you very much, Robin. I'm in my 5th year on school committee, and just the amount of work that you are able to get done and all the multitasking that you engage in, even during these meetings. Those of you in the public may not be aware that Robin authors the minutes, and they are extremely detailed. They are extremely helpful. It allows us to have a great sense after the fact about what it is that we discussed exactly. And those documents are really immortalized. They're around forever for those of us to review. So you've really had a major impact on school committee. And that was just one small example of all the work that you engage in. So we're definitely going to miss that. And thank you very much. And of course, on a personal level, we're going to miss you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Janae?
Thank you, David. Robin, I just wanted to say I've loved having you as my neighbor, my immediate neighbor for the last couple of years. You are so kind and you are so competent. And I just want to agree with what everyone has said. You will definitely be missed, but we're so excited for you to travel with your family. And just thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Stephen?
You're on mute, Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to put my 2 cents into and say thanks for all that you've done. Thanks for giving us so much coherence in your minutes, granting us so much lucidity that we didn't really have in the meetings itself, but making us seem like we had strong points to make, but also just for being so humble and so competent and so excellent and so kind to us when, I mean, there's so much turnover in the school committee, and I'm sure we all have the same questions over and over and over, and you never make us feel stupid or annoying. You just help us out whenever we ask questions. And so thank you for that. And it's really been a pleasure working with you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just like to say when Robin came into my office, she says, Linus, can I see you for a second? And that intuition that you have lets you know. And I was like, oh yeah. And we talked about some business, and she says, oh, I want to let you know that I'm planning to retire. I said, well, Robin, I had you on my radar. I said, well, when are you thinking? She says, in a couple of weeks. I was like, wait, what?
No. Longer than that.
Meaning that it was, that we'd be losing you sooner, but the retirement is certainly later this year. But I had her retiring in a year or two, but certainly not this year. And so I think echoing everything that everyone has said here is spot on. Just anytime you ask a question, she knows exactly where the information is and can pull the case files as well as the emails and all of the pieces that go along with it. And so it's just absolutely amazing. And so I want to thank you because I've learned so much from you in the way that certainly policy is organized and around just appreciating the fact the archives that you've managed in terms of what we should be doing over the course of the year, having meetings laid out and what items should be coming up when has made my job so much easier. And so I just want to publicly thank you for all of that hard work.
Thank you.
Andy?
Yes, so over the past year, I've had the privilege of being with you every week in docket preview meetings, where unlike in the public school committee meetings, you actually do a lot of talking. And so I've gotten to know even better than most sort of how wise you are and how knowledgeable. It's really been a privilege to get to know you in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Valerie?
So I've only known you during COVID, and I can't imagine all the work that you do to put this group of cats together on Zoom for not just our full committee meetings, but our many, many, many subcommittee meetings. And getting emails from you at 5 o'clock on Sunday morning or 10 o'clock on Saturday night. You're one of the hardest working people I've ever met, and so dedicated. And as everyone has said, answers all of our questions so kindly and gently when we are perhaps running aground. So thank you so much, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all of you for all those kind words. That really just means so much to me. And it's been just an honor and a privilege to work for this town and for the school department all these years. And I feel so fortunate to have worked with so many wonderful people, just so smart and talented and dedicated. And it's just great, and I'm ready and I'm excited for the next stage, but I'm feeling a little bit sad. This has been a great place to work, and I'm really going to miss all of you. So thank you.
I'll always make you cookies, always.
The best cookies.
And as many of you may already know, Robin's not leaving the office quite yet, and there will still be some more opportunities for us to all meet together and say our goodbye, and currently at least in person. Anyone else? Well, on that note, that concludes our meeting for tonight. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Do we have an executive session?
Not today. No need for executive session tonight.
Yeah. Good going. Thank you. Good night.